Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Ready Steady podcast, the Ready Steady Play podcast, where we talk about board games, the board game news, and the games we've been playing. As usual, I'm Mike, and I'm joined by Barry.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Thanks for having me, as always, Mike. But people see me in the background coughing. It's because I'm rather unwell this week, unfortunately. Hopefully, it's all done before Christmas.
Well, I could not get a replacement, Barry, because you are irreplaceable. But Barry is very sick, so we're going to try to give him a nice, easy episode this time.
The Lemsip's kicking in. I should be all right for an hour or so.
All right, we'll try and keep it brief, but we never succeed at that.
No.
So before we get into talking about the games in this episode, I just want to mention that we've got the charity stream coming up on the 6th of December. This is a 24-hour gaming charity stream that I've done for 3 years running. This is part of the bigger Thankmas event on YouTube, where content creators on YouTube just go out and sort of do what they do. I've got some fun stuff lined up for this charity stream. I know that Paul is going to be joining me to play something, Paul Grogan from Gaming Rules, and Mark's going to be joining me in person to play something at the end of the stream as well. And we've got a few other guests lined up as well, which I'm really excited about, to do some discussions and maybe play some games. But as well, we've got some great prizes lined up. I've been really touched by all the support coming out from the publishers as well. We are supporting Crisis Text Line and Samaritans this year. So this is about charities that help people who are struggling maybe with their mental health. And this is really about suicide prevention. So a really good cause to be contributing to, and something that I'm really pleased to be a part of. And so we've got a package of games from Czech Games Edition. So you can get your hands on some code names. There's a Lost Ruins of Arnak in there. There's a Starship Captains, and a Deal with the Devil. So if you wanted to try it and you don't want to buy it, come and win a copy by donating to the charity stream. We've also got some stuff from Osprey. They've given us some Undaunted, Normandy. We've got a copy of Merv, and some more bits and pieces from them as well. So I'm going to be bundling these up together to make some bundles that you can win. I'm going to throw in a copy of 20 Strong that Chip Theory Games have given us as well. Spielworks is sponsoring the channel. There's 4 copies of Una to go out, which is a Euro game from them that they reprinted in 2022 as part of a Kickstarter. It looks really interesting, Euro game. Spielworks always do these sort of more like independent and interesting productions, so you might be able to win one of those 4. We've got some games coming from Naylor Games as well. They sponsored us last year. They're really nice, and they're coming with a few more games as well this year to support the show. And we've got a all-in pledge to Revenant from Mindclash Games as well. So that's their current Kickstarter that's running at the moment. We're going to talk more about the game later in this show, but that's really exciting, an all-in pledge, so you can check that out as well and potentially win it. And anyone who donates any amount of money now or during the charity live stream will have a chance to win this stuff. I always do a charity draw at the end of the live stream to sort of cap it all off. And so all you have to do is donate any amount of money, and you might win one of these things. And there's a link in the description for the campaign page.
Do it.
So, do you want to take the first news article?
Sure. First news article is for a reprint of a game that I spotted, and a game that's been on my mind throughout the years, one I never picked up, and this is Lovecraft Letter. So this is originally published by...
Is Love Letter AEG?
Love Letter is AEG, and then Lovecraft Letter was a version based on Lovecraft, right? So the Cthulhu mythos, which may or may not come up again later. And there was a few interesting twists.
Alderac Entertainment Group, AEG was at least the English language sort of main publisher.
Yeah, because obviously Love Letter itself was originally a Japanese game brought over here by AEG and themed it into their, was it Courtesans universe? Or Courtiers universe? Something like that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I actually have the original Japanese factory edition of Love Letter, which has the sort of Japanese art on it and things like that. So I sort of missed that part.
Anyway, Love Letter, very simple. One of the first popular micro games that came over. There's only 18 cards in the small version that originally started things. And then it got a number of rethemes, and sort of small expansions throughout the years, until Lovecraft Letter, which is based in the Lovecraft universe, the Mythos universe, but it's been out of print for quite some time now, and it was a very popular version of the game that not a lot of people had. The artwork originally was Vincent Dutrait. Included some very nice poker chips instead of like little wooden tokens to count your score, and there's a lot of things to like about it. But it's been out of print now for some time, and there have been people wanting it to come back into print, and so this has been re-implemented by Fantasy Flight Games into their Arkham universe. So Arkham Horror, Eldritch Horror, their Arkham Files universe, which is obviously based on Lovecraft original Mythos universe. But this time it is using their, what has to be said at this point, bog standard art, right? Their art is in so many different things for their Arkham Files that it all just looks so samey and loses a lot of the charm for art-wise. However, I think...
Yeah, sorry to jump in and interrupt your flow, Barry. I was just going to say, I think if you only ever played one of the Arkham Files games, you'd probably be quite pleased with the FFG art. It's very good and sort of fitting of the period. However, they have a lot of those art assets and they do reuse a lot of them. And so suddenly, if you play more than one, or you're really into the Arkham games and you play all of them, you'll start to see a lot of the same assets cropping up over and over.
Yeah, and so it's also worth noting that FFG effectively license the universe from Chaosium in a big part. So I didn't know that. I've had the I'll start with the original Call of Cthulhu CCG before it became the living, so the collectible card game before it became the living card game. But basically the art that's in it is still the same art that I've been seeing since 2008. And so whilst it is all of an amazingly high standard, it is all very what's the word I'm after here? Consistent in terms of how it comes across, and it does sort of drip with theme and with horror and all these kind of things. I've seen it for the last 16 years, and it, because it is so consistent, because it is so internally consistent, shall we say, a lot of it ends up looking the same, even when it's perhaps a new art piece. It's the same character you've seen before, and sort of the same situations and poses you've seen before. And it just loses a little bit of the appeal from the more bright and light artwork that Dutrait had done for the previous version. But regardless,
it's hard to compete with Vincent Dutrait, and to an extent as well. I think if you're very familiar with an IP, it would actually be nice to see another artist take on familiar characters.
Yeah. Hopefully the artists are credited. They not always are in some of the FFG stuff, but certainly on their card games they have been, so hopefully the artists are credited at the bottom. And it seems to be revolving around these characters rather than the larger mythos creatures that were in the AEG version. So where it was like Nyarlathotep or Cthulhu, and there they've gone for one of their sort of investigator characters or sort of secondary characters from the stories, instead of these large gods of old.
I only know base love letter. So are you trying to get like an elder sign to the head investigator or something?
There's a couple of extra rules in it, and I've actually never managed to play it. Like, I've only ever been on my periphery in terms of actually that's a version I'd like to play. My version of Love Letter, my go-to version of Love Letter is Batman.
Right.
Where you get an extra point for the guards. So you play Robin, who's the one strength character. You get the character right and you take the card out of another player's hand, you get a point. Makes the game just a little bit faster and more interesting when you're knocking out somebody when it's not for the deciding point of the round. And so this one has additional elements of insanity, or insanity. And I'm actually not 100% sure on what they've changed. I believe there's like 2 or 3 very small changes, which they've not got the rules up for yet, so I'm not 100% sure.
Well, if this is something people have been interested in playing, then certainly it's probably worth looking into.
It coming back into print in any form is probably going to be very welcome. It's just quite a stark difference between the old version and the new version artistically.
Oh, well, good stuff. Well, I certainly will be keeping an eye on that.
You seen anything of note?
Well, I've just got to shout out sort of two things here. Last Aurora has got the new versions up on crowdfunding. This is the sort of race across the nuclear winter post-apocalypse setting where you're effectively running a convoy, and it's actually a sort of pseudo Euro game. It's a real hybrid. There is a lot of random elements in it, but it's. I'm hesitant to call it tableau building because you have a visual representation of the convoy in front of you, and you are functionally racing across the nuclear winter to be the first to reach the Aurora, which is a boat that's setting sail as you go. And so you're trying to get to the Aurora and be the first one on. But this functionally only changes the endgame scoring, where if you reach the Aurora, it's all about how many people are in the convoy, and if you don't, it's about who built the best car. Because your convoy is represented by a car in front of you, which you're going to build by drafting cards from marketplaces or purchasing cards from marketplaces, and then they go into your convoy. And so building out your convoy by attaching backs and wheels and fronts and weapons and cargo racks and things to the convoy. It's very satisfying. Very nice visual representation of all of that. And then you've got to fit all your people and all your fuel and all your ammunition in there as well. And the whole thing, I don't know what weight rating it's got on BGG, but it can't be higher than 3. It's got to be 2.5 to 3, I imagine. That's what it feels like to me. In the sort of the wingspan plus, maybe slightly lighter than Dune Imperium.
2.8.
Maybe around that. 2.8, yeah. Yeah, that's pretty bang on, I think.
Yeah.
So that's all very satisfying. That's very good, but there's a little bit too much luck in it, especially given how calculational other things are. And, it never really got to the table much, and people didn't seem to be much interested in getting better at it, which is a pity because there's sort of some advanced maps and things like that, which I never got to try. But in any case, I wasn't so enamored with it myself that I was keen to bring it back out or force it on people for experimentation purposes. It doesn't innovate on anything major, but it's got lovely art and it sort of realizes that theme well. Anyway, it's not going to stick around in my collection. I've played it a few times. I'm more or less done with it. But we talked about it in more detail in episode 8. You can go and find out a bit more about it in episode 8 if you like. But I'm not going to get involved in the new Kickstarter.
No, I think I was looking for a game that was more similar to 51st State. I thought the theme was on a par with the post-apocalyptic nature of it, but the description of the game's not 100% what I was hoping for, or thought it was from looking at the cover. If it is more of a racing game. My group doesn't really like racing games of any sort. Yeah. I've tried them on lots of them now. So if it is a race to the finish, then they're probably not going to be terribly interested.
Yeah, and there's also points awarded for the sort of the distance you are behind the leader. So there is that race element. Like I said, it sort of changes the end game scoring in 2 ways. If somebody reaches the Aurora before the Aurora departs. But I've not looked at the changes. It looks like there's a bunch of changes. And in the new Kickstarter, or at least there seems to be another core set or something. I know that the designer has put out some design diaries where they've talked about changes and sort of lessons learned from the first Kickstarter and things like that. So it might be worth checking out, especially if you love the original despite its flaws. It's definitely not a straight tableau builder. I certainly wouldn't compare it to something like 51st State other than the theme. I think in a weird way, Last Aurora captures the sort of the sense of post-apocalyptic, like Mad Max style race across the desert, race across the nuclear winter, in a way more than something like 51st State, which does feel more like a straight tableau builder. But 51st State is a nice little tableau building game, and I do enjoy it more than Last Aurora ultimately, if it's just a mechanical thing.
Yeah. Hopefully get a game of it at some point, but also not one I'm jumping on backing. Speaking of games that are coming to crowdfunding, this is a game I spotted on... actually, it's a game that's been advertised to me heavily on Facebook, to which I then had a look at it on GameFound, and it's a game called Abyss. Now, I know what you're thinking. There's already a game called Abyss,
I was thinking that.
Bruno Catala and published by Bombix. And the reason I clicked through the advert at the first point was the advert had just AI, very clearly AI generated art in the background. Like nothing was even close to symmetrical. It was all over the place, spires coming out at odd angles, things along those lines. I'm like, oh, why are these people advertising on Facebook? And I went to it, and whilst they have done, I first saw it a few months ago, and they have done a number of things since then that make it look a little bit more professional, but they are still using AI art. However, none of that's really what I wanted to talk about. The fact that it's called Abyss was always something I was like, well, surely you know there's a board game already called Abyss. And just 2 days ago, both Bruno Catala and the CEO of Bombix left a comment saying, we already have a game called Abyss. However, the CEO was a little bit vague on whether or not they have the trademark on it. So I was like, let me look it up. This is a kind of interesting thing I get into in board games, right? Nothing else to do. So I'm
glad we've got your research here on the podcast to share with the masses.
So I went onto the European trademark search thing and had a look for Abyss. And there's a few Abysses, but none are by Bombix and none are in the board game category. And I was like, okay, interesting. So it's a little bit of posturing there. Obviously, as a board game community, whether or not we can accept a second game called Abyss, there's definitely other games called. Well, there's another game called Abyss from 2005, which predates Catala's and Bombix's 2014 release. But I don't know what grounds there are for protections on names if you don't trademark them, and I would imagine not many. Anyway, good story. Whilst I looked this up yesterday, I did have another look today, and the people running the campaign have said that they're in touch with sort of the support at Bombix to discuss what's going on there. So hopefully that will be solved before it's released. What it really needs to solve, though, is its over-reliance on AI art and unclear directions on their cards. I think it would fail on its own merits if it launched as it is just now, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, that's fair enough. I don't know anything about it, but yeah, I do think, I mean, it's not like we're without precedent for games having similar or overlapping names, especially when they're short, punchy names, it's, the thing is, I think it tends to be something you want to avoid if one of the games, an existing title, is extremely popular, right?
Yeah, which
like
Abyss is.
For example, would not put out a game called, say, Castles of Carcassonne.
Wait a minute, I think you're onto something there. Let me write that down.
Yeah, it's just confusing and not in a good way, and I think that would lead to, I mean, you'll get people whose attitude is there's no such thing as bad publicity, but I wouldn't want that kind of publicity, and I certainly wouldn't want to spend all my time trying to address complaints or comments or issues that came up. There's no name that's so good you can't find an alternate title.
Very true. And the whole thing is their mischievous god of this world is called Abyss. Just change his name. Like, it's not a cool enough name that you want to hold on to it.
Void. Call it Void. You can have that.
And what if he was to fall somewhere and hurt his eyes?
No. Call it, Void Rising.
There we go. Brand new, inspired. Although speaking of Castles of Carcassonne, I did see there's a new game announced and being previewed at the moment, which is the Sandcastles of Burgundy. So based on the actually that's not true. It's nothing like Castles of Burgundy. It's the same designer, same publisher. But it is a baby games for babies. So it's Stefan and Suzanne Feld, published by Ravensburger, and Castles of Burgundy, potentially my favourite game of all time, or certainly my best rated game of all time.
One of my favourite Euro games.
It's great, fantastic. On this one, I think it uses some of the similar mechanics, but here's a brief description. Queen Crab is coming to visit Burgundy, and you want to decorate your village for a royal beach party. Find the right decorations and collect points. The animals of the Royal Guild will help you when you've finished decorating their shops, but can you find the animals before the others? and it's got like sort of little plastic pieces, and I think it's a little element of memory game where you're hiding the pieces and moving them around. And so I think it's very much a junior game rather than like it might be a family weight game, but definitely tending more towards the youngins. But I thought it was quite interesting, and I like the idea of Sandcastles of Burgundy.
I like the name.
Yeah, the name more than perhaps the game.
But it does raise the question, because I mean they've obviously gone for the tie-in. It contains the full name of Castles of Burgundy.
Mm-hmm.
Is there beaches in Burgundy?
Bon Beach, Lac de Siston, the Étang de l'Echenay Leisure Complex. Yep, looks like there's at least rivers and there's sandy beaches along those rivers if it's not on the coast.
Brilliant. Well, at least there's that thematic tie-in. Well, the last little bit I've just got from the news here is, of course, that when this episode comes out, the new campaign for Cthulhu Death May Die will have just launched. It is the third in the series of Death May Die campaigns. And I've not had any chance to really look at it, partly because it's not live as we're recording this. I have, however, been playing Fear of the Unknown a little bit, which is the second Kickstarter, which is in the process of delivering at the moment. So I'll talk about that when we get to the played section. So that's I think that's it for games in the news. There's a few little news articles I wanted to touch upon just very quickly while Barry rests his voice. Barry's highlighted something in the news about reviewer drama. Of course, I'm completely oblivious because I don't really follow this stuff, and I tend to avoid anything like that where I can. We don't do ratings here. Barry uses the Board Game Geek rating system on occasion, and you can find that rating system by Googling Board Game Geek numbered rating system and find out what that is. I think it's all right. I think it's pretty good. Personally, I'm allergic to number systems. I don't like them at all.
As we all know, Mike can't count. So
well, I can't count for a start, and ever since I lost all my fingers, it's become impossible.
Yeah, the Board Game Geek rating system is more an indication of how likely you are to play it than it is of how good the game is. A game that you rank a 10 is something that you just always want to be playing, always want to get to the table. Whereas as you drop further down, it's not necessarily an indication of quality. Yeah,
it's not necessarily. So it's an entirely subjective system. And I think where it falls down a little bit, like, because 10, always want to play and never expect this to change. That's great. 9, excellent, always want to play. Sure, makes sense. 8, very good, like to play, will probably suggest it, will never turn it down. That's where it starts to lose me a little bit, because there's a lot of games that I would rate 8, 9, or 10, which I would always want to play. Something like Arcs, for example. Spoiler alert for my honorable mention of Arcs later on, but there's a lot of situations where I wouldn't suggest Arcs, like a lot. So that's where it starts to fall down a little bit, and where I think, a lot of people tend to shortcut. Once they see the numbered rating, they make an assumption about what the reviewer is going to say, and they zone out on the information. So that's why I tend to avoid numbered systems. I think we can add more value by going into a bit more depth and trying to talk through some information about the game, as well as some objective information about the game, as well as our subjective feelings about that stuff. And I think that adds more value in the long run.
Yeah, always listen to what a reviewer is saying, more than just looking at the number. Like, this goes into video games as well, it depends on the person also, but you've got to kind of get to know us as people to know what we like and why we might suggest something's good or bad, or what we liked or didn't like, at least.
And I'll always try to couch it in context as well. If I'm taking a really strong opinionated stance on something, I'd like to put it into context as well, without so you can better understand that.
But there are some games that are just terrible.
Well, yeah, there are. I think I think John Perkis, Actual Law, put it quite well. When he said, the vast majority of games I play with people I love, and so I always have a pretty reasonable time. And that's context. And that's the kind of context that's quite important. You know, I think, as a reviewer, we have to try to put it into a more objective appraisal to say could be right for this sort of group. It could be right if you like this sort of game. It could be a right fit if you like this other thing. This is what it does differently. If you want more or less of this aspect of a mechanism or a style, you might find that here. Those are the kind of things we can say that are helpful and largely objective. Where we get subjective is I don't really like this sort of thing. And that can be quite difficult for me because I love board games and I love almost all kinds of board games. And I genuinely have almost a great time almost all the time.
I do not.
Yeah. So Barry,
I'm predisposed to hating it unless it's good.
Barry likes solo games because it cuts out the worst part of board gaming. The other people.
all my reviews are purely objective because I'm not there with other people to ruin it for me.
So that's I just wanted to sort of touch on that anyway before we go into the games we've been playing and enjoying this week.
Well, let me talk about a new game to me, something that I found on Board Game Arena, just recently published, and that is Castle Combo. I think it's out in real life, or it's just coming out in real life this week. If it's not already, this is published by Catch Up Games and designed by Gregory Grard and Matthew Rossell. And it is a very quick, very light tableau combo builder. You have a 3x3 grid, but it's not a fixed 3x3 grid. So what I mean by that is when you play your first card, that could be your center card, or it could be your top right card, or it could be your middle left card. You're going to build a 3x3 grid, but the first card you put down is not locked in place. Only when you're 3 wide and 3 tall is your grid formed. And on your turn, you're going to use your limited gold to purchase a card from the row. And there's like a row of 3 sort of peasants and nobles. I'm not 100% sure what they're called, but you've got like a bronze row and a silver row, and the messenger moves between the bronze row and the silver row, and you can buy from whatever row he's in, or you can spend a scroll, which is a point at the end, to move on between rows to get the card that you want. Then you pay for that card, you put it in your tableau. It'll either have end game scoring, so something that's going to score you points. That'll be you're looking for matching sigils at end of game to score some points, or it might have an immediate effect, something like there is some player interaction, so destroy a card in somewhere else in your tableau, destroy a card in somebody else's tableau, add coins to cards that are already played, and they're worth points at the end if they're filled, or there's a few different actions that happen when they're played. But mostly you're looking to build it up in a way where you've got the right cards with the right sigils next to the things that score them points, as well as combo off what you can based on the card abilities and score the most points at the end of the turn. Or the end of the game. So it's 9 turns, everybody will have 9 cards to finish, and you add them all up. It's very straightforward. The combos were interesting. So that's the part of the game that's going to make or break it on any of these sort of combo builder or tableau builders with combos in them. Can you play cleverly? Can you make interesting combos? Is it different most of the time? Can you make the most of what's there? Or are you just specifically looking for 1 or 2 cards that are the ones that are going to get the most points? And the combos from the couple of games that I played were different in both games and were interesting in both games. A couple of times I had to play a card face down to get more resources, which is another option. Other times I was able to play all 9 cards out. I was able to move to get the cheap silver cards, and then I went on heavy on silver scoring. Other times I had to go on positioning, where I score up, down, left, right, so that's going to be my middle card, and then always working to get the right coloured sigils in those positions to maximise my points. It was all very straightforward, but a lot of fun and light enough that you can easily play a game in well, 15 minutes on Board Game Arena, but probably not much longer in real life.
Well, that sounds delightful.
Yep, and the art's like little cute medieval themed, knights, barons, royalty versus bakers, carpenters, the people you might find in your fiefdom. It was good fun.
Well, I'll have to give that a try, especially if it's on BGA. Then I can certainly have a game. I shouldn't struggle to find it.
No.
All right. Well, I've been away at GridCon, which is Paul Grogan's gaming rules convention in Devon. So I've been nothing but gaming. It is pretty much entirely game open gaming space down there. One publisher, Gameslore, does attend, but publisher, it's a store, a retail store. No publishers attend. Gameslore are there selling games. And then, there are quite a lot of sort of sponsored elements as well from Paul's industry contacts and things like that, running raffles and sponsored demos and things like that. So it's altogether a good time. I have a nice time down there. We just shack up in a hotel, play a ton of games. So I've got quite a lot of honorable mentions that I'm just going to rattle off mostly quickly because we've talked about a lot of them before. I've got 4 games I'm actually going to talk about in more detail because they're either live on crowdfunding or new or from Essen or something like that. But what I'll do is I think I'll just rattle off at least most of the honorable mentions really quickly first, because I'm not going to go into any detail on them. We've talked about them enough on the show already. I got to play Arcs again. It was great. I played it at 3 players. We all had a great time. So much so that the exact same 2 players, one of whom hadn't played before, asked if we could play it again the next day, which we did, and had another great time. Arcs is great if you like that sort of thing. It is hard to quantify why the people it gels with so hard. But while we were playing it, we had lots of people coming up to us and going, "Oh, this is great, isn't it?" And that doesn't happen very often with those with games at the at the convention. In fact, it happened only twice. It was Arcs, and we had Dune Imperium Uprising, which is of course, the Dune Imperium core set. We're doing my preferred way to play, which is with Ix and Immortality integrated. We don't use any of the other card sets, though. So the Imperium set, the conflict cards, and the intrigue decks are all from Uprising. The only exception is there is a conflict card that comes in Rise of Ix, which you have to use because if you want to play the epic mode, which we were playing. So the 2 expansions, playing in the epic mode, and people were stopping by, partly because I have a nice set of Uprising. I've painted a bunch of the miniatures and things like that. But partly also because people just love Dune. And they were like, "Oh, this is great." And we had a lovely time playing that. That was 4 players. I still really like it. I'm very excited for Bloodlines, even though it's just more little bits of content. That's great and always welcome. I also only use the characters from Uprising as well. I don't use the player characters from any of the other sets, not even the expansions, actually. Just the Uprising characters, I think. Just the Uprising characters. So that's my preferred way to play, but everyone's got their own perspective, and Uprising is always a good time. I played Guards of Atlantis 2, which is designed by Artyom Nichipurov, and we've talked about that in the very first episode. It was one of the 5 games I love. I lost again. I don't think I've ever won this game, Barry.
Have you considered getting good?
Well, the problem is, Barry, it's a team game, so I have to get my whole team good. But maybe I'm the one letting everyone down.
Yeah, if you're the common denominator.
It's true. I'm the through line. But it's great. I love Guards of Atlantis. I don't mind losing at it. I always have a great time playing it, and this was no exception. We played a 6-player game, 3v3, and it took less than 2 hours, and that's with a teach, and everyone had a really good time. Guards of Atlantis 2 is great. I played Agent Avenue, which is a new 2-player head-to-head game from Nerd Lab. It is designed by Christian Kudal and Laura Kudal, who are 2 of the 3 designers on Mindbug, of course, missing Richard Garfield. And this has got, so in this game, it's a sort of a rondel track And you both start equidistant with little agents in this lovely little suburban setting. And it's sort of like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, right? Like you're suburban house people, but secret agents. And then it's all anthropomorphic animals. And the game is very, very short and very quick. I could probably teach it to you on this podcast, but I won't. But it is got lovely art design artists. I've called the artist's name is Fanny Pastor Burley. I thought the art was great, and it's a take on the if you've ever played Tussie Mussy by Beth Sobel, then you will be familiar with this sort of one face up, one face down system. You play 2 cards from your hand, one's up, one's down, and your opponent has to pick the face up one or the face down one, and it's sort of mind games. And these cards are representing different assets. So saboteurs, spies, informants, things like that. And you flip the cards up into your tableau in front of you, and as you collect them, you get to advance your little character around the track, and the objective is to catch the other person's character. And that's pretty much it. So you catch up to them. There's a few other cards that could cause you to lose the game or win the game in another way, but it takes less than 10 minutes to play. It's head to head, and it's just super fast. And overall, we had a really nice time with it. Lovely art, lovely presentation, dead quick to play. Just a sort of a small crowd pleaser. Well, not crowd pleaser, a small something to scratch that sort of head to head itch. But it's definitely sort of like mind games. It's not, deep strategy. Last one for this section is just Izayoi, which is a Japanese game. I played twice. We played it at 4 players. It is designed by Nanatsumu and also published by Nanatsumu. So I don't know if that's a person or a company. The name's in Japanese on BGG. So that's all I've got. But this is a really cute little auctioning sort of game. You've got a hand of cards that represent values associated with the players. And what you're trying to do here is you're trying to give gifts away to other people, right? And you are artisans who are making different crafts, and you are students and masters. Students in one craft and master in another craft. So someone else is your master, and you are someone's student. And so what you want to do in the game is to receive points by getting given gifts, but you want to have the most points, but less than your master. So the only way to sort of win against your master is your master then has more points than their master for the thing they're a student in. It's got this really sort of nice wrinkle where you're all sort of bidding and auctioning off these items and trying to give other players points so that they effectively go bust. And then of the players who've remained in the game, you want to have the most. And then there's a sort of a wrinkle as well where someone might actually be dealt their own card. So they are, in fact, their own master, and they're just trying to get the most points. But you can't be too obvious about it, because the minute people see that you're putting down yourself against all the gifts, they'll be like, oh, you're your own master, and then they'll just stop giving you anything. So it's again, this sort of like really simple auction system with this really nice sort of like mind game wrinkle, because of course, all the master cards are secret. Everyone knows who their master is, but nobody knows who anyone else's master is. Anyway, it'd be a really fun little mind game. I would absolutely go and buy this if it was possible to acquire, but it looks like it's only being distributed through crowdfunding at the moment, and the campaign is done. Sad.
I will say that Nanatsumu is a publishing group, so not.
So sadly, we do not know the designer's name.
Yeah, I mean, it could be Go Igarashi, but don't hold me to that. Not least of all for my pronunciation.
I also worked out the killer strategy in Izayoi, which is to give one of my specific opponents the umbrella. Every game I gave them the umbrella, and I won. So it's a completely consistent strategy that works without fail.
Makes sense to me. Well, I could quickly run through my honourable mentions as well, because one of them is Umbrellas, which is on Board Game Arena. Basically, the game is, I would describe, Tash Kalar meets Labyrinth. So in Tash Kalar, you have a grid on which you're trying to make shapes with tokens to get points. And Labyrinth is a much more family weight, again tending towards junior weight game, where you're sliding tiles in from left, right, up or down, and pushing the other tile off. So in this game, you'll take a gem of one of 4 colours, or an umbrella of one of 4 colours, I should say, slot it into one side of your 4x4 grid board. That'll push all those shapes up, one umbrella will fall off, and wherever it falls off, that token's then available for another player to take it, but it'll either be to the top, left, or right of their board, and they would have to take a token comes in from that matching site. It was a fun little game. I definitely play it another couple of times, but it was on Board Game Arena again, and worth having a little look. Good little sort of puzzle game. You're then giving your opponent your scoring card, and you can flip it, but they'll get your scoring card, and then it goes back and forth until somebody scores 10 cards. Again, a little bit like Tashkalar, where you're getting points for scoring cards.
Yep.
Played Through the Ages, which is a game I've played many, many times. A couple of times real life, or more than a couple of times real life, but mostly the last couple of years my plays have been either on Board Game Arena or on the app. I think I have it on iOS and Steam. I've played it quite a bit. However, playing it in real life for the first time in about 3-4 years maybe, got every single rule wrong.
No.
It is easily the most everybody played it before. We're like, oh yeah, sure, we'll have a game. We sat down, and I think it wasn't until age 3 when we finally got most of the rules right. There was just loads of things, like lots of small things. It didn't ruin the game, but we weren't originally clearing the row. We were forgetting to take the 2 cards off the end after everybody's turn.
Oh my god, it must have lasted so long.
So like, this is taking too long. Like, what's going on?
It's already a really long game.
Correct, yeah. So it was about 3.5 hours for 3 players in the end. But
that's actually pretty fast. When I've played, it's gone on longer.
Oh well, get good. or just play
play wrong.
Yeah. It's like I've got 50 ore for some reason. Yeah. But it was good fun anyway, and I definitely want to play it again in real life soon, rather than rely on the app.
This is one of those games where every time I play it in real life, I'm like, oh, this is so good. Why don't I play it more often? And then I guess, I don't know if I'm just playing with more new players or thoughtful players than you are, Barry, but my games of Through the Ages easily last 4+ hours.
Yeah, I mean, it can do. We played with the... I actually think half an hour of that was sort of set up, because I switched out all the core game leaders and wonders for the expansion leaders and wonders, and so it just took a little bit of faffing with the decks, but yeah, I think it's maybe an hour 15 per player, so yeah, if you're playing 4 players, it can take some time, but it's really good. Rebirth, got to the table, first time playing a full game. I did see it at the Games Expo, so this is Knizia's new one. Super fast, super fun. Basically, you're drawing a tile, either face down or from the bag if you've got the Kickstarter version. It will either have a farm, like a field, an energy farm, or a building. They have to go in specific spots on the board. Whenever you put your tile down on the board, you'll score points for the number of matching tiles of yours that it touches. And if you put it next to a castle, and you have the most spaces next to that castle, you'll claim the castle. If you put it next to a cathedral, you'll get an end game scoring objective that you're working towards. Castles are worth 5 points at the end. Your objective's typically worth 3 to 5 points at the end. And you're just going to be getting points for everything you do every turn. And so you just see that your score marker ticking up as you go around. And yeah, a lot of fun. Like the game, well, I can get points here, but I really need to stop this person from extending their energy fields or their energy farms, so I could block them. Is that better than just getting points myself? And in a 3-player game, I think it's always better to get the most points for yourself than stop somebody else, because all you're doing is helping the third person in those instances. But if it ties up with an objective you're working towards, have the most control around Glasgow Castle, for example, then maybe it's kind of worth doing. So getting those objectives early and just seeing what you get and putting them out. I think it's a very solid, very simple game. and something that can be played well under an hour, even at 4 players, once everybody knows what they're doing.
Well, that's great news to hear, because I did back this and I am excited to play it, but I haven't been able to table it yet. And I was so disappointed. I say so disappointed. I was disappointed by Cascadero, which was the other sort of similar game coming out from at roughly the same time from Reiner Knizia, different publisher. But Cascadero, well, I was talked about it before in other episodes, so I won't go into it. But anyway, so I was sort of a little bit like, oh, is Rebirth going to be... Have you played Cascadero?
I've not played that, or Cascadito.
I mean, I'm not really interested in Cascadito. That's just a roll and write, which is not my favorite. After saying earlier in the podcast, I pretty much love everything. Roll and writes must be my least favorite. Doesn't mean I won't try them, but certainly my least favorite. I do enjoy Welcome To, which is technically a flip and write.
Yeah.
I digress. Pleased to hear Rebirth's good.
No, it is good. I've not played the Ireland side yet, which is a bit more gamey, but definitely will at some point. Then DinoGenics I spoke about, played that another couple of times. I'm definitely going to buy it in a late pledge if I can. It's good. Just a good worker placement. Fun time.
Yeah, I did end up backing it, so I'm pleased to hear that you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, like I played it 2-3 more times, and it's just solid. I want to play the expansion now, so recommended. It's even good at 2. So only played it 2 or 3 players, but still fun. Played a lot on Board Game Arena. Played Nimalia. I don't know if you've seen or played that.
I have. I've played quite a lot of Nimalia.
Yeah, like it's again, it's on Board Game Arena, so played it there. But I describe it as Cartographers meets Shoal. Have you played Shoal?
I have not.
So that was one of the little games I bought at Expo. But basically, it's like Cartographers from the point of view you're scoring certain points and certain objectives in certain rounds.
The way the objectives score out over the course of the rounds. Yeah, absolutely.
You know in advance what they're going to be, so you could spend, round 1 building up for a big score in round 2, or you could try and score maximum points in rounds 1, 3, 4, and 5. Ignore round 2. You know in advance what you're going to be scoring. And then you've got little 4x4 cards, which have different animals and different terrain types on them.
Yeah, I think you're technically building a nature reserve.
Could be anything. Like, I thought it was a zoo.
You've got terrain and animals, but I think it's and they've got rivers on them as well.
Yeah, so you might want to build the longest river. You might want to have the least gorilla. Oh no, it's the most gorillas and the fewest pandas. But they're typically on the same tile. So how can you cover them up? So when you place a tile down, it must cover a matching terrain type, at least one matching terrain type. Is that right?
It doesn't need to cover anything matching. It just needs to cover at least something else.
Is it? Okay, fine.
Well, actually, that's not even true. It's got, it's just got to exist within a specified grid, I think.
Yeah, there's a limit to how wide or how tall you can go.
Yeah.
I don't think you can place it over anything, because it certainly wasn't letting us do that on Board Game Arena, but I couldn't 100% work out what it was, when it would stop me. And it wasn't just because I was going outside the grids. You can't go something directly over, and you can't go outside the grids. That was fine. But there was other times when it wouldn't let me place, and I wasn't sure why. Anyway, it was fun.
Yeah, this is a tiny little box game from Lucky Duck. At least the version I've got is from Lucky Duck, which was a review copy that they gave me. I've only ever played it in real life. I used to carry it around in my bag and just break it out. I've mostly played it at 4 players. I've played it at 2 as well. And yeah, it just sets up these objectives that you're scoring round to round. And then each round you're drafting these cards, which are they 2x2?
Yeah, 2x2.
Yeah. 2x2 cards, and you're laying them out in your tableau. And I think that, and then you've got a specific grid size that you can build out to. And there is some kind of constraint around what you can and can't cover up that we don't recall. But I think that, I don't know if you have to cover up one space on a card or something like that, but it's quite lenient about where you put them. And you can, I think, just really just cover up whole swathes of your
Yeah.
your situation, which makes it reasonably unique in the sense that you can just sort of build up, but you'd have to be some kind of savant, I think, to do that, because most of the objectives are looking for the longest thing or the most stuff, things like that. Occasionally, they'll look for the least crocodiles or something like that, so you're trying to cover up the crocodiles while getting more spaces. But there's no baseline scoring like you see in something like Harmonies, or
Even Rebirth, get a point just for doing something. No, you've got to be matching those objectives.
Yeah, if you're not, the only scoring comes from the objectives. So nothing you do matters if you're not hitting those objectives. And one of the things that's quite nice about it is it comes with tons of objectives and you can randomize them game to game. And it also gives you a guide on how difficult the objectives are. So it's like, these ones are for the people that have played a lot. Don't put a bunch of these in if you're playing with new people, which I really appreciate because it's a very sort of light and accessible game. And I love how small the box is. I've come to appreciate a lot of things about Nimalia, even though it's very small.
Couple other ones, just very, very quick. King of Tokyo Duel. I finally had a bad game of it. I can see myself having more bad games of it, so I don't think it'll be a keeper. Played Flowers on Board Game Arena. It's an abstract tableau builder where you've got you're trying to build sets of numbers. So there's 4 colours, 4 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. You need to get 4 4s touching in order for them to score. 3 3s touching for them to score, 2 2s, 1 1. But if you ever have more than that, then they don't score. And they would only score the amount of colours that are in their group. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. So you could have a 4 and a 3. So you could have 4 4s touching, red, yellow, green, blue. And then you could have a red 4 touching 3 red 3s. And then the red 4 will score 4 because it's touching 4 red ones, not because it's touching 4 4s.
Right.
So you've got the 2 sides of it to look at. It was fine. You can cover up cards. You can. You're trying to build it in a way where you're not going to lock yourself out of what you're trying to achieve, and you want to score as many cards as possible. It was okay. I'd probably play it again, but it wouldn't be my first pick for a game at that weight.
Sure.
And then 2 solo games real quick. Played Coffee Roaster, which is a solo only game. I liked Coffee Roaster when I first got it 2-3 years ago. 3-4 years ago actually. And then I got a bit bored with Coffee Roaster. This is a game where you are bag building. You're pulling out a certain number of tokens, which represent the roast of the beans. And those beans go from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to burnt, if you leave them in for too long. And then at some point, you track the value of the beans in the bag, and you're trying to make a specific cup of coffee. So let's say it was a Java, and you wanted to get a cup of coffee that was 13 roast. The perfect roast for Java was 13. And so you know what's in your bag, or you know the values that are in your bag, and you're trying to take as many turns as needed to roast your beans, and then pull out from the bag within the space for your cup of coffee, which is like 10, 11 beans, to get to the right number, along with the flavours. There's flavour tokens in there. You don't want to pull out burn beans. You don't want to pull out unroasted beans or under-roasted beans to try and get as close to that value as possible. And then depending on whether you get a good score or not, you can go up to sort of the next level of difficulty, or you basically make 3 cups of coffee and try and get the best score you can. So it's playing against a score game. Not a lot of people, or a lot of people don't like just trying to better your score games in solo, but this is one of those. But like I said, I liked it, and then I got kind of bored of it, and then I went back to it and just took my time and had a cup of coffee and just like, okay, I'm going to play the 3-cup game, and I enjoyed it for what it was. And then I played another few games, and I'm cooling on it a bit again, but I'll see how that goes. I know you don't play many solo games, so you've probably not tried this one, but it's interesting. A lot of the
solo games I play tend to be longer, sort of narrative-driven games.
Yeah, this is not that. And finally, I want to play Path of Civilization proper, but they have the solo version on Board Game Arena, and so I was like, I'm going to learn how to play, and I didn't bother reading the rules. And so I just went for it. And the first couple of games, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just want to see what happens. The good thing about Board Game Arena is you can do that. The game will keep you right.
Yeah,
like, okay.
So long as you're playing solo, you can do that.
Yeah, don't do it in a real game. And so I did that, and then I got a feel for how the game played. I was like, okay. So then I had a quick flick through the rules to try and understand it, and then I got it, and then I played it. And the first game I played it after understanding the rules, I won. I was only playing on the easiest difficulty, but it's another score-based game. You're trying to beat an AI scoring throughout the game, doing different things. And I did that, and then I thought, right, I'm going to try something different. Played it again on the easiest difficulty, lost by a couple of points, not much in it. And I thought, right, I'm going to try something different, lost by a couple of points. Went back to playing that first strategy I decided on and smashed it the next 2 times. I was like, I'm sure there's more to the game, but the game has a fixed market for buying things, and so you can guarantee what cards you can afford on certain turns, with the only variability coming from perhaps the leaders or wonders that are in place, which may accelerate your plan, or alternatively provide enough resources to change your plan. But you can kind of you can plan it out from the start, and often that's fun. But I wasn't able to find another way to victory than I was in those first couple of games I won. Right. So I'd be interested to play it multiplayer, but I think, I'll either have to hit up the strategy forums to see what to do at harder difficulties, or find out what the different paths are. Paths to civilization.
Well, I was going to say, when it comes to sort of fixed marketplaces, if we played the same Dominion Kingdom over and over, that would get pretty stale pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Is Path of Civilization, what kind of weight is it?
It's not light, because there is a lot of iconography. Let me see what Board Game Geek ranks it. 2.77, so actually it's not super heavy at all.
Okay. It's because I was sort of picturing like, a sort of a bigger 4X-y kind of civilization building game, but it's not that.
It is not that, no. You've got your cards. You've only ever got 5 cards, really. You pick 4 of them to generate resources for you in that round and discard the other one, and you can only ever buy 1 new card.
Right.
There's a couple of...
So it's very much sort of like tableau building, combo building.
Yeah, I mean, there's no real tableau either. You've got a single leader that you can buy, but whenever you buy another leader, it replaces it. So right. You're using that ability for a limited amount of time, and there's different tracks for you to go up. And basically you're scoring every other round based on resources, combat, resources, combat, resources, combat. Both is how the game works. And it's fine, and those objectives change. Like, it's always combat, but your rewards are different. And the resource objectives change every game. But I didn't find it mattered so much. It just meant, sure, I can go heavy on blue or religion early on, because that scores in the first rounds 3 and 5, rather than science. But you can plan that out from the start. And it doesn't, I don't know. It didn't change a lot between my games. I did play quite a few games. I'll have to play with other players to see how interesting it actually gets.
Fair enough.
8 games I've got logged here, so must have played it 8 times.
So reasonably short to play through then. Certainly when you're on your own, making it up as you go.
Yeah, when you don't know what's happening, you're just picking a card. Easy.
Well, that's us through the honourable mentions. We've rattled off a whole ton of games there, so now we're going to get into the ones we've played that we want to dive a bit deeper on. But I'm actually going to start this off with a relatively light one that I think we can cover quite quickly. This is Cthulhu Death May Die, Fear of the Unknown. This is the new Kickstarter. It was 3 more big boxes for Cthulhu Death May Die. We did a playthrough of the original core box on the show a long time ago when that first delivered. It is designed by, the original game is designed by Rob Davio and Eric M. Lang. They've brought in Marco Portugal on this one, who is a developer at CMON, now a credited designer on the game. I don't know how much input Rob Daviau and Eric Lang have had on the new set, but obviously Eric Lang has departed ways with Simon, as far as I can tell, perfectly amicably. And I don't know, Rob Daviau just kind of was part of the design of this particular product there. It uses some DNA from The Other's Seven Sins, which was a one versus many Simon game from back in the day. But what you're doing in Cthulhu Death May Die is it's a cooperative game for up to 4 players. You might be able to play more with the other boxes and stuff. I don't know. Now that you've got the new core set, maybe you can play more. Certainly, it's designed for 4. But the way the structure of the game works is each players take turns taking turns, and at the end of your turn, you'll draw a card, which will activate some enemies. So there's no formal enemy phase. So feasibly, you could play actually up to 8 now, but I wouldn't. So what you are doing is you're all taking on the role of investigators in the sort of Cthulhu mythos period. This is a very pulpy, tongue-in-cheek take on this setting. So much, much sillier than the Arkham Files from FFG stuff, much, much sillier than the Chaosium stuff, and sort of conveys its silliness by taking itself very seriously. So it portrays itself very, very seriously, and then it's just very, very pulpy. It's very action-oriented. The game itself is very, very quick, and it's got this sort of unique system for setting up where the game is a series of scenarios called episodes. The episodes have a chronological order, although from what I can tell, there's no actual narrative connecting any of them. Perhaps it's just an escalating complexity and or difficulty. But the difficulty is widely variable as well, because once you've picked an episode, which is the plot for this game you're going to play, you're going to pick an elder god to play against. So you might play episode 2 with Cthulhu, you might play it with Narthlatep, you might play it with the Black Goat of the Woods. Yeah, who knows? You pick one of the old ones that's available to you. I think there's a 2 in each core set, plus there's like 4 or 5 others available through stretch goals and mini expansions and whatnot. So there's a lot of modularity to the game, which I think is part of the appeal, because it's once you've got your old one picked, you throw the 2 components together. There's going to be a board that's set up by the episode. It's going to give you an objective, which might be, kill the cultists. It might be, persuade people not to burn any witches. It might be stop the aliens from abducting mooses. It's pretty wild. And all the while, it's being augmented by the old ones who have a very long scale of discrepancy in terms of difficulty. And there's quite a few handy guides on BGG of people who've just been like sort of logging win rates against the different elder gods to try and calculate sort of a rough scale of difficulty. And it sure would have been nice if that had been in the box. I think that would have been a quick and easy and helpful way to sort of help people adjust the difficulty. But they never did that. And now in Fear of the Unknown, instead they've added in some little modules you can use to augment the game further, to tweak the difficulty up and down. I personally don't think this game is so difficult that you will need to tweak the difficulty down. But what they've done is they've added 2 modules in Fear the Unknown, one of which is random enemies. So normally you've got a set of enemies that are... There's always cultists. And then you've got a selection of monsters, which are, nefarious evil creatures from the Cthulhu mythos. Barry, is it mythos or mythos?
I would go with mythos.
Mythos. I always get in trouble for getting this wrong, and I always forget which way I'm supposed to say it. So we'll say mythos.
You'd never say myth, would you? However, you did say mooses, so who knows?
Should I have said meese?
You're Canadian, you tell me.
No, but it's GIF and GIF all over again, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is.
So the mythos, it's a bunch of monsters from the Cthulhu mythos, and typically they're determined by the episode and the elder god. So the elder god will bring some along with it, and the episode will add a few more. So you'll have 2 or 3 monsters, different monster types running around this particular setup. And so Fear the Unknown adds a way to randomize that so that you can add some more random monsters into the fray and create a little bit more surprising unknowables. It also adds in these unknown mythos cards. There's a mythos deck, and the structure of a round is you get to take a bunch of actions with your hero, doing daring do, and then any monsters in your space will punch you, and you have to draw a mythos card, which will punch you. Anyway, the point is the mythos cards refer to the monsters in the game. So in order to add more random monsters, you need to also add some mythos cards that can move those things around and interact with them. So you kind of have to play with both those modules together. I don't know if there was some rules to not do that. It did seem to indicate they were optional, but mechanically, I don't know how that would function. Unfortunately, I didn't get to play with any of these modules. There was also a relics module, which gives you these magical things that at first glance appear to be mundane. But the way the game works is that you have an insanity track. And every time you do something in the world, whether it's punching cultists, blasting monsters, or investigating rooms, you'll have to roll dice and, well, you may have to roll dice, and you will start to go insane. And at first, this is good because as you go insane, you can level up your character and unlock more dice to throw, but get to the end of the insanity track and you go irredeemably bonkers and lose the game. So you have to try to manage this shift because there's no way to regain sanity. It's a one-way track. So that's the sort of the core of the game there, is trying to level up enough to beat the final boss without leveling up so much you go insane and lose. And the relics, these mundane items, flip over as you accrue insanity. So the more insane you go, suddenly your pen is a flamethrower, because you're crazy enough to believe it could be. And that's very charming. I really liked the idea of that. The version I've got, which is the Kickstarter pledge, came with a box of pets as well. And they start off just being like these really mundane animals. Like there's an owl that can carry items back and forth between characters and a cat that can lead enemies away. But then when you reach a certain point of insanity, suddenly the cat becomes, haunted and every enemy in its space takes damage. And it just says, because you believe the cat is haunted, which I thought was really, really cute and pleasing. But I just played the first 2 episodes of the new core set with a new player who'd never played the game before. And I had a really good time. This game is always a blast. It's dead simple. It's not particularly innovative. It's fast. It's punchy. There's always a nice sense of discovery. I mean, I've got a ton of content for it. I've not even played all the episodes from the original Kickstarter. There is something like 15. So it's not an insurmountable number of games. But even so, even if you played through all of them, there's still all the different Elder Gods you can sub in and out for more variability. So there's a lot of replayability there in terms of just discovering new and different configurations. There's also the added variability of the player characters. I would argue that this is probably the least exciting variability because fundamentally the way they work is that each player character has 3 skills that gives them other than their aesthetics, which are all quite unique and quite nice. Each character's got a nice bit of art, a little tagline, a little bit of bio, and a bit of art as well as a unique sculpt. There are tons of characters, and the only mechanical thing separating them is the 3 skills that they have and can level up over the course of going insane. And there's 1 unique skill for each character. So each character has 1 that's completely individual to them and 2 that come from a very limited pool. And so that configuration gets pretty samey pretty quickly, given that there must be over like 100 characters if you have both these Kickstarter editions. It's, the core game comes with like 8 or 10 characters. Each one comes with like 8 or 10 characters, I think. And then like the stretch goals is like another 40 or 20 or something stupid. And they're just not that unique. The other thing I'd note about them is that they are also widely variable in terms of their useful applications. And some of them are very good no matter the situation, and others are only good very situationally. So again, it's another way to make the game sort of harder or easier, but without any real guidance on how to apply that except by knowing the rules and having played the game, which is fine because I've not played it as much as someone else who might get to play repeated plays of things more than me. And I mean, I must have played this game about 10 times. But I even after 2 or 3 games, I felt qualified to sort of make these sorts of assessments and curate the experience to be harder or easier based on what I was looking for. It's still a bit of a gamble. I don't know for sure how things are going to turn out, but at least I can make my best guesses. And the game is so sort of straightforward and quick to play that I'm not, and so goofy anyway. I'm not super bothered. It's not like Spirit Island where you come away and you go, okay, now I want to ratchet up the difficulty like 1 notch to try and sort of iterate on what I just did, or try like a slightly harder combination. This game's more kind of like, let's just throw these things together and see what happens, and that's fine. It's not a puzzle you're trying to solve. It's so dicey. It's more kind of like a sort of an action sequence that you're executing. And to that point, like I say, we had a really, really good time, but I did feel like these 2 episodes were definitely felt a little easier and a little less tight than what I found in the original game. For all its dicey weirdness, the original game had a sort of a really good consistency at coming out exciting and close in the end. And this one, and it was possibly just because I threw in those 2 pets. So although we were playing without any of the sort of extra modules and stuff, the pets are a relic. They're supposed to go into the relic deck and everyone gets some random ones. We weren't playing with the relic deck because I didn't want to throw in the unknown creatures, and the relics make it easier. I didn't want to make it too easy because I was playing with a new player. But I did give us 1 pet each because we just liked the minis and we wanted the pets. But maybe they just made it, even that 1 card made it too easy. So it might not be a fair assessment. But I did think that the 2 scenarios we played, albeit with 1 little extra card, which was quite powerful actually, did feel a bit easier and a little less tight than the original core game. Having said that, still a great time. I do like Cthulhu Death May Die. I have basically everything for it except for the giant Cthulhu statue that they made, which does have some kind of gameplay. Yeah, so they'd made a giant Cthulhu for the original game. It has some kind of gameplay application. I think it's just an episode, and ultimately you just wind up putting your models on the base of it. But I never looked at that because it was so expensive, and it's just too big. Like, if you're really into painting or sculpting, or this is going to be like that sort of, this is going to be your big game, I can appreciate why you might have wanted that. But it's such a big commitment for something that's very. I mean, I guess only in 1 episode. Maybe it's an elder god that you can throw into every episode. I don't know. In any case, there's a new Kickstarter, a 3rd Kickstarter, and because a lot of the replayability of this game comes from variability, I think, it's always nice to have more stuff. Having said that, there's a lot of stuff already. It takes up a huge amount of space, and it is a quick and punchy, light, random co-op game. I say light. It is light by the standards of probably most hobbyists. I would potentially use this as a gateway game, in fact, because I could set everything up and curate the experience quite easily, and people would just kind of run around having fun and blasting monsters. It's so accessible, and it's generally very, very light on rules. And the rules that are futzy or difficult, I can easily manage, and it's got that added benefit of being a cooperative thing, so you don't even have to teach very much up front to get started. But yeah, I suspect I will end up picking up the remaining boxes in the new Kickstarter. I don't think I'm going to pick up Giant Godzilla. I think I don't need that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I need any more of this, if I'm quite honest. I think I could probably be quite satisfied with the rest of the stuff I've got.
It doesn't matter about what you think you need. It's about what you want.
Yeah, and every time I get this out, it's just a very solid and consistently enjoyable experience. And I think so far as light, fun, beer and pretzels games go, this one is a bit of a no-brainer. It's just dead easy. I mean, not
Still
to
not
play.
played it.
You can ratchet up the difficulty. I just mean to sort of get to the table and enjoy.
Yeah, like it looks good. I wouldn't mind giving it a go at some point. I don't necessarily think I want to own it, but I would like to play it.
Yeah, certainly this is for groups where you've got those kind of beer and pretzel gamers around you. You've got people who maybe aren't super into the hobby, but who might enjoy something like this. It's got quite a hobby-centric theme, which is a bit of a pity, but maybe, so you might have people, anyway, being into the sort of the theme certainly helps. But, if you've got a sort of a very hardcore hobby group or a group of players that are really dead keen to sort of improve their skill levels every time they play a game, really get into a system and get better at it, this is not going to satisfy people like that. But, sometimes I just want to chuck some dice and blow up some monsters.
Very cool.
I'm just trying to think. If you enjoy Street Masters, you'll probably enjoy this. It's lighter than Street Masters.
Not played that either.
If you like Mansions of Madness,
got that.
This is quite different. Mansions of Madness is certainly more focused on solving the sort of the puzzle of the scenario than it is on killing monsters. This is much more focused on just chucking handfuls of dice. This is also dead quicker. Like, I think to set up and play, this is even faster than Mansions of Madness.
Yeah, this is a bit of a faff with Mansions once you've got all the expansions.
Yeah, once you've got everything for Mansions, it turns into a quite a long experience, actually. And so this is much quicker and much punchier than that. Yeah, anyway. And I also, if you like Zombicide, you'll like this. This is better.
I used to like Zombicide, but got rid of it all before 2nd edition.
Well, there you go. Maybe this will bring you back around.
Maybe.
To sort of dice chucky adventure-y stuff.
Very cool. It's a good looking game as well. Well, going from that to a proper Euro, a real gamer's game, I managed to get SETI played. I know you played it at Essen. Have you played it since then?
No, unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to come back to this one. It's sort of one of those things where I really need a sort of a weekend to do it because, it's a longer Euro. But I did share my thoughts on it in episode 15, so you can check that out as well.
Yeah, I managed to get it. Looked interesting. Something I wanted to play. I never got a look at Games Expo this year, but this is published by CGE and designed by Tomas Holek. Excuse me. And in this game, you are searching for extraterrestrial intelligence. That's the name of the game. So you can check out episode 15 for more of an overview of how the game plays. But I managed to play this at 4 players. And had a good time. It was a longer game. It was sort of 3 hours, 3.5 hours at 4 players. And it was quite close in the end. There was only a few points between us. I was last player in the first round. So basically, people take turns alternating their actions, and everybody launched a satellite in the first round. And I'm like, whenever this happens, it's always best to do the opposite thing. And so, and that's often the case in these games, right? So everybody does something. Maybe it's best to go somewhere else to pick up easier points. And so I had a few cards in my hand. I can't 100% remember what I had, but basically, I was going to go down the technology track earlier as best I could to try and get stuff. So I tried that, and then the game played out, and then my end game scoring was I needed a bunch of satellites. I was like, I wish I got a few more of them out early on. And so at the end, it was sort of a race to put the satellites out. And I ended up, I think I came second by 5, 6, 7 points, something like that. Now, I'm not sure what the score track goes round to. Is it 100? Is it?
Oh, I think it easily goes up to 200.
Yeah, but it's 100 round.
Yeah, I think it's 100 round, and then it comes with 200 and 300 tokens, I think.
So I think we got, to like 170-ish was sort of the
yeah, that's roughly where we were in our first game as well.
Yeah, and it was interesting. The actions on the cards were interesting. The basic actions were interesting. My only real complaints about it were that the player interaction was incidental. So there was a number of times throughout the game where the center board would rotate and it would move you away from the thing that you wanted to do.
Yeah.
But it wasn't as if the other players were deliberately trying to stop you doing it. Often the fact that it rotated was incidental anyway. They'd buy a technology which would rotate the board. It was nothing to do with what they were interested in. It's just something that functionally follows buying a technology. And at 4 players, it was quite difficult to know where the board was going to be by the time it come back to your turn. And so that was the only real downside. Everything else made sense. Everything else was interesting. The choices were interesting. When and what to do. How to go after something. I think I would have won had I not been screwed over by the middle bit a couple of times.
The middle bit?
It was just a little bit. Like, there was one...
the middle rotating dot.
The rotation of the...
thing? Okay, got it.
Where I could launch my satellites to. And similarly, where some of my cards were requiring to be played. So, had I completed a sector... I was waiting for a sector to rotate round, but somebody had a card that let them complete a sector for the data points, and it meant they'd just put me at the post, because coming in after with the same number of pieces, you win it.
Yeah.
Rather than being there first. Which is unusual in these kind of games, but fair enough. And I had to focus on winning that sector again for too many turns to let me finalise my scoring. So I enjoyed it. I'm not sure of the strategy. I think it's too big a game to really decide on after one play. I think it is good. I think it requires additional plays to know if it's a firm favourite. There's a lot of comparisons to Endeavour and Endeavour Deep Sea. Just the placement of your little pieces out on the board, and then when you go to a planet or whatever, moving them down like that. Just putting your pieces on the board give people a similar feel to Endeavour Deep Sea, which we played quite recently. But yeah, it was good. I think it's worth playing. It might be great. I don't know yet.
I mean, I think it's definitely worth playing if sort of heavier Euros are your jam. If you tend to bounce off heavy Euros, this isn't going to change your mind about that. I also think if you're sensitive to disruptions in the puzzle, especially disruptions that are incidental rather than deliberate attacks, then certainly the 4-player version of this game might rub you the wrong way. I like that stuff because I like to be spending a couple of turns going, I've got my whole next turn planned out. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend 3 energy. I'm going to go here. I'm going to blast that. And then somebody does something that I didn't expect, or it rotates somewhere, or it reveals asteroids I didn't know about, and now I'm a resource short. And I'm like, I have to rethink this whole puzzle.
Yeah.
I like that, but that really annoys some people, and that's fair enough.
It was just... Earth had just rotated outside the sector I wanted to be in, and I needed either Venus to come round. I had a card that would let me activate from Venus, or I had to wait for the whole thing to go round, and just to be waiting those 5 turns, doing the sort of build up, and then just for it to rotate past again. And I was like, oh, you son of a gun.
You've got to sort of sit there and go, all right, do I have the resources to try to blast this satellite backwards against the current? Yeah. Or do I sort of try to go forwards, or just kind of hope to wait and get the free movement around the board? I like it. I think it's a nice sort of novelty. I can see it frustrating people, though, who like a really tight Euro puzzle, who like to sort of be able to predict what other players' behavior might do based on the player's intentions, right? Like, I think that's the sort of the key point about it not being a deliberate attack. You can't always anticipate when it's going to move, because people might do it incidentally when they're focused on other things. But yeah, I've enjoyed my play of SETI, and I'm also keen to play it again. I think it probably will end up in a category where I'll probably get sort of a number of plays out of it, and then maybe start to sort of move on to other games. But we'll see. Well, it might surprise me. Did you get both of the aliens discovered?
Got both of them discovered. I was the only player that came in on the second set of aliens, but it meant I didn't quite have enough on the first set of aliens. But the turn that I discovered the second set of aliens, I was swimming in cards, because you get a card for every one of the things you complete in order to discover the alien. And I had a really great turn that turn. I picked up like 2 or 3 extra cards anyway. I got those 3 extra cards, and basically just people were just watching me for like 4, 5, 6 goes as I was doing stuff on the board, and having free reign there was fun. But yeah, we did find both of them. However, I should have had a few more satellites out or complete a few more sectors in order to get on the first alien board more. I was only had 2 pieces on there in the end, and the player that won got 45 points just from the top row of aliens. I won't spoil it by telling you which aliens those are. And that's quite a big chunk in a 175-point game, and we weren't able to contest them on those. But he had to give up, 9 data points to do that. And as I said, the game in the end was only less than 10 points in it.
Yeah. We only discovered one alien race in my 3-player game, so we kind of focused a lot on that and hammered that rather than pivoting to the other one, because it was a reasonable amount of for this sort of game. There was some player interaction there that made us more competitive about that one and focus less on the other. Keen to play a bit more of this anyway.
Nice.
I'm going to try to space these out a bit in terms of sort of enthusiasm. So we've done Cthulhu. I enjoyed that. We've done SETI. We both enjoyed that. I'm going to go back to the honorable mentions because I forgot to do Joyride, which I brought to GridCon. And it's in the honorable mentions camp because I've already talked about it a lot. I've really been getting on with it. I've really been enjoying it. I played 2 games of it at GridCon. The first, both 4 players, which I think is the best count. Maximum argy-bargy chaos. Obviously, it's still not as chaotic as Thunder Road Vendetta and not as tight as Heat, which are the 2 comparisons that everybody in the media has been making. Now, there's sort of two parts to this. The first part, which is the drama that's been going on the forums for Joyride. I think, it's probably important to mention this. I don't really want to get involved too much in it, partly because it seems to be a back and forth between 2 parties and I'm not across the facts. People are actively posting as we record this, but I also think it would be remiss of me not to mention it, particularly because, I think that I've looked at that and it's probably important to bring up. But this is a discussion happening between one of the designers. There's 2 credited designers on Joyride, Duncan Malloy and Pete Ward, who work at Rebellion Unplugged, who make the game, and very kindly sent me a review copy of the base set. Of course, I have since purchased the Turbo Edition, which comes with more content. So there is a game designer, a Dutch game designer named Corne van Moorsel. Apologies if I've spelled that wrong. This person has designed a game called Street Soccer, Power Ships, and Power Boats, amongst others. They are generally publishing through Kawali, which might be their own publishing company. It's certainly not a publisher I'm familiar with. And I wasn't familiar with their games at all until this discussion came up. So a smaller publisher for sure, possibly a self-publishing designer. And this designer made a post on Joyride effectively accusing Rebellion Unplugged of plagiarizing their game Power Ships and the predecessor Power Boats. Power Boats is a game about racing motorboats, and Power Ships is a space game about spaceships in space. Anyway, because this is not directly related to game mechanisms or anything like that, I'm going to try to be incredibly brief. But this person has said, that they were approached about potentially working with Rebellion Unplugged on a reprint of one of their games for a larger distribution, and that never went anywhere. And then Joyride came out, which borrows a lot of the mechanisms of their game. From what I can see, it looks like the similarities are largely in the way the dice are managed. It's the way in which you have the sort of the phase structure of locking some dice and potentially turning and then moving that far, and then rolling gearing up or gearing down and adding or subtracting dice and rolling those dice accordingly. It looks like that system particularly is very close, if not identical, to power boats and power ships. I'm not completely at liberty to make that comparison because I've not actually had a chance to engage with either of those two games. But there's a big thread on the Joyride board with responses from Duncan Malloy in there, as well as responses from Cornet in there as well. So I think it is, just on a sort of a wider level. When it comes to these sorts of things, we've seen this sort of discussion come up before around games that are clearly very inspired by other games. And when does it become plagiarism? And the answer in a legal sense is never, because you can't trademark game mechanisms. You can only trademark art and names, unique names, and things like that. So you can't trademark this exact configuration of mechanisms, and you could feasibly actually just take a game and reprint it in its entirety with all new art and assets, and maybe change the pieces. I'm not sure how far this extends to unique novelties. I'm thinking, about something like Hungry Hungry Hippos, where you've got this very unique game component. But certainly in terms of actual mechanisms, and it's a slippery slope, because once you start trademarking mechanisms, this whole industry could just become a quagmire of, that's the thing that I own, you can't use that. And nobody wants that, which means that we're left in a world where actors have to be expected to act on good faith, and make good faith distinctions between what is inspired by, what is a fair development of, and where original artists should be, artists should be credited and potentially even paid, and especially paid if it's warranted, and I suppose as a community we have a responsibility to engage in enforcing that sort of good faith behavior, because the last thing we would want to see would be a lot of smaller designers and independent designers getting ripped off or taken advantage of and stopping to design and put out products. It is often the passionate indies with a dream that drive innovation and challenge preconceived design concepts. So those are very valuable people that we want around, and where possible, supported by established industry people. Now, Rebellion Unplugged is hardly a massive publisher, albeit they are attached to a very large video game publisher. I don't understand the full dynamic of their relationship. I can't really comment on that any further, and I don't really want to comment on this particular conflict any further because it's still ongoing. And, I think the best thing to do would be to go and check out that thread on Joyride and maybe check out the rules for power ships and make up your own minds, and take what you deem to be appropriate action. But I think it would also be remiss of me not to call attention to this discussion. I think it's sort of an important consideration for the reasons outlined.
Yeah.
With that in mind, we played Joyride twice at GridCon. And we played it twice at 4 players, and I was keen to dive into some more of the stuff in the turbo box that I hadn't seen. And the first game was good in the sense that it had some moments of real excitement and drama, but only between the 3 players who were losing. There was one player who got a pretty strong lead quite early on, consistently held that lead throughout, and won, which somewhat deflated the excitement of the game. Now, this was something I was sort of thinking about in terms of... So we played a very sort of easy and reasonably accessible scenario, I think, for that one, because I had 3 new players at the table. I didn't want to, pick anything difficult. But we were doing one of the maps that's not in the core game. And my conclusion after this discussion, by the way, is going to be that the core game has been a more consistently strong experience. I've enjoyed almost all the plays I've had with the core game, and actually a play I had with my first play with the turbo content was excellent as well, but that was with experienced players. And so this game, we had a runaway leader. We couldn't stop them from doing anything. In order to stop them, someone would have very likely had to sacrifice their position in the game. So, i.e., just completely sabotage their own chances of winning in order to sabotage the player in first. But that was kind of a lose-lose scenario, because if they didn't sabotage their position, it looked very much like they also wouldn't win unless this player in first just somehow threw a bunch of bupkis dice. But they were just playing very sort of solidly and very carefully and optimally, and they just won. And the thing is about the game is it ends the minute someone crosses the finish line. So there's not even like a podium, and maybe implementing a podium might be a way to mitigate some of this sort of runaway leader. Certainly there are also weapons you could put in the game that would give players a little bit more agency over attacking other players. Although having said that, I'm not sure how much control they would necessarily have. Certainly we had flashbangs, which can be deployed out of the front of your car, launched. So a sort of direct attack, and nobody with flashbangs was ever in a position to attack this leader, despite some attempts to contrive the situation. But everyone had a reasonably good time anyway, and I certainly enjoyed the game. And then we played again later, and I picked a much, much more challenging map with, I had one player who played before, and two players who hadn't played before, but were very competent gamers. However, this game must have some rather unique elements, because it flummoxed them enough to the point where about 90 minutes in, it was me and the other player sort of competing for first, and these other players were so far behind. They hadn't even completed the first lap as we were rounding to complete the second, which really felt bad. They had almost no tools at their disposal to deal with this situation, and that's just unfortunate. Obviously, Heat has some pretty strong rubber banding elements, to the point where people argue, is there any point in playing the first few laps? This does have some catch-up mechanisms in the form of the unique powers that recharge that each car gets, and the further back you are when you cross the line, the more your powers recharge. But having said that, there is a degree of positive feedback loop if you get out ahead of the pack, your life will be easier, unless they've got weapons they can shoot you with. So this might be a case of, again, curating the experience to give people the tools to deal with a runaway leader. But that game was, and this is my fault, I set it up with a track called Precision, which it turns out it requires a lot of precise turning and sort of careful maneuvering. And I'm not sure if that's necessarily where the game shines. I mean, it definitely is good, but that was kind of the whole track. And I think not having any breakaways, like long straights where you can just floor it, was a bit of a pity. So I think going forward, I probably won't look at that particular layout again. But it's fine, because there's a ton of scenarios in the box and rules for making your own. So, this is a perfectly resolvable situation. However, I'm just conscious that if I'm not careful to curate the situation with new players, people can have a bad time. And certainly I would want to put in devices, I think, in all of the games going forward. I'd want to curate the weapons a bit more, maybe focusing less on the weapons that appeal to me, which are the goofy fun ones, and focus more on putting in weapons that allow people to deal with a runaway leader. Because this doesn't have the Mario Kart blue shell, and it feels a bit like it might want that.
Not played it, so not had an experience either way. But yeah, like runaway leaders is a problem in games if there are no tools for them. If people can't gang up on the leader, if there's no, what's the word I'm after, like self-balancing mechanism where the other players have to decide whether it's worth it to bring somebody back or propel themselves forward.
It's just players balancing the game state, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, in a race game particularly, the runaway leader, and it's a problem that they tried to solve in Heat by adding the two things, isn't it? And if you're in the 5th and 6th position, you just get a bonus, which is just a straight catch-up mechanism. But the slipstream mechanism in Heat also allows you to get ahead, but you can only slipstream off of cars in front of you. So that's, again, another kind of catch-up mechanism to keep things tight.
Flamme Rouge, of course, like if you're in the front, you become exhausted, and if you can slipstream in behind somebody when you're at the rear. So,
Yeah.
Grand Tour, Flamme Rouge Grand Tour, that should be out quite soon.
Yeah, but I'm still enjoying Joyride, and for what it's worth, and hopefully I'll get it to the table a few more times and check out some of the other new stuff. There is a magnet in there, which we did play with. I was not super keen on the magnet just because it was quite difficult to parse the rules, and this is not a game where I really want to be heads down in the rulebook. But there are also more jumps, and destructible barricades, which are great. And what's particularly cool about the destructible barricades is you can blow them up with the rocket launcher. So put in the destructible barricades and put in the rocket launcher, and that makes you feel real cool.
Not to get too off track, but you mentioned a couple of times now, like, curated experience. I find I'd much rather the experience was curated for me, and I would, the designer and developer have done the work to give me the best experience out of the box, rather than me having to fiddle with lots of different elements to find the right balance. But
well, that's exactly right, and I completely agree with you. I've said it before a bunch of times. One of my favorite things about Spirit Island is just how many tools it gives you for managing the experience, and to an extent, they've done halfway right with Joyride, because they've given you all the maps. I've told you how to set them up, but it would be nice to have sort of suggested weapons.
Mm-hmm.
For example, maybe like a difficulty level on the cars. I maybe they're all equally balanced, the cars. But you can give like a sort of a random degree of randomness or degree of control. Sort of give us some keywords on what the cards do. This one's very precise. This one's very fast. Like the names might give away a little bit, but they don't really give you much indication of the play style until you try them out. Another game that does it really well, Guards of Atlantis 2. Incredible detail on how all the heroes play and what they're sort of expected to do, and there's sort of strategy tips on there as well to get you started. So, these sorts of things are always really appreciated, and if you've been playtesting it and designing it a lot, you must know this stuff. So just, find a way to communicate it to the players in a way that is approachable and instructive and helpful, because at the end of the day, like, if you want your game to do well, you want people to be able to find the best experience for them when they're actually sitting down to play it. And giving them the tools can only help. Just don't overwhelm them,
I just wanted to talk about a game that I sort of stumbled on Board Game Arena, and it's the Gamme Game Logic games. It is a series of 3 games: Jungle, Birds, and Hotel, published by Banky's Edition. I don't think there's any designers credited, but these are very light games of logic, little puzzle games, little logic games. And on Board Game Arena, every day there is a new daily puzzle, but generally you can just play it at whatever difficulty you fancy. And there's hundreds of variations to each of these 3 games, but you play them sequentially. So you can buy these for like €15 direct, or €15 each direct. But let me explain what they do. So each game is a slightly different variation on a logic puzzle. Birds gives you 6 birds: a purple bird, a red bird, a green bird, a yellow bird, a blue bird, pink bird. They're all different shapes as well, so you can still play this if you're colourblind. And there are 6 slots, and you have to, based on the rules on cards that are flipped over, determine where these birds must be in order to satisfy all 5 of the rule cards that come out. So some rule cards could be as simple as yellow bird position 2, or it could be green bird on the ends, and it won't tell you which end, but the green bird has to be on the end. Purple bird left of the blue bird, and red bird cannot be next to green bird. Right, so let's say those were your rules, and then you've got to figure out the only combination of birds that matches all of the rules that you've been given. The advantage, or one of the interesting parts of Board Game Arena, is this is timed. So you can play it multiplayer, and it's based on how quickly you can solve the problem to do them all. But that's how Birds works. Hotel is a little bit different. There are 5 levels of the hotel: top floor, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st floor. or ground floor, first floor, second floor, third floor, fourth floor, depending if you're UK or US. And again, same thing. You've got 6 tokens, and you've got to figure out where they all go. So again, you'll flip over the cards to tell you the rules. Could be this purple monster, 3rd floor. Red monster must be above green monster. 3 creatures must be on the same level, and I don't know, like nobody can be in the penthouse. And so again, you have to figure out what's the only combination of locations where each of the 6 hotel guests could be that satisfy all the rules on the cards. And then finally, jungle's the last one. There is 8 slots in the jungle. There is down the left-hand side, so it's a 2x4 grid. And in this grid, there's a grasslands at the top, 3 jungles. There's 2 stones, a grasslands, and a mud. And you've got elephant, monkey, snake, toucan. You've got these different animals. Again, you flip over the cards, and this will be frog must be near the lake. Toucan cannot be in the mud. Tiger is directly above the elephant. Elephant must be here. And then you've got to work out exactly where everybody can be on that. And the daily puzzle, so that's all 3 different kinds of games. They're all fundamentally the same. Where do these pieces, these tokens go that fulfill all the rules on the cards? The daily puzzle, I've actually not done yet, but on easy mode, you basically play 5 games back to back and see what sort of time you can achieve. So I've got some down to like 20 seconds, and sometimes I'll sit there and scratch my head and be like 2 minutes. I've not quite hit the 3-minute mark on any of them yet, but I am just playing on easy. However, I think for the daily puzzles, people are cheating because they've definitely got times in 10 seconds, and it's just not possible to move that fast. So it's a little disappointing. Turing Machine, which is another logic puzzle game on Board Game Arena, had to stop offering multiplayer Turing Machine because people would cheat. And so I think the same thing's kind of happened here. They figured out a way to game the system and get those ridiculous scores. Anyway, it's a pretty basic logic puzzle overall. I think any one individually is not super exciting, but the mix-up of them, the 3 of them back to back and being a timed game against somebody else is fun. I like logic games, I like deduction games, and if you like them as well, give it a go, or they're relatively cheap, buying direct from the publisher.
Oh, brilliant. Well, I do like a logic puzzle as well, especially if it's a light and easy to, not light and easy to do, but sort of a light and easy to set up, you know, and get involved
They're all easy to figure out. Well, they're not easy to figure out. They're all figure outable. It's just how quickly do you like, yep, got it. And sometimes you're like, that's right. It's definitely right. Check it. And then it's like, nope.
Well, I don't mind bashing my head against it for a while, especially if it's a tricky puzzle. But what I don't want to do is spend 40 minutes setting it up. So
no, it says
it's a tiny little box with no pieces. Great, I'm in.
There's no the board for the bird is just the 6 spaces for the bird. The board for the hotel is just the 5 floors. The board for the jungle is just the 2x8 grid, and then it's just turnover. I'm not sure how you get the cards. I presume there's a book of puzzles in real life. And basically you just go through them and just be like, okay, what fulfills all these criteria?
Oh, brilliant. And then presumably the book of puzzles must have the right answers in it somewhere as well.
Yeah, I'm going to assume it works like Knizia's Brains series, where there's a hint book and there might not be a hint book in this one, but there's a hint book and an answer book.
Oh, that's great. I like it when they give you a hint book.
Yeah. And basically,
I mean, I'll never use it, but I like to have it.
Well, the hint book just tells you where one piece goes, and then it really helps, right? Because you're like, okay, well, if that's there, then I know that I can't move that.
When you're crippled by a lack of confidence.
Yeah.
This can't be right. I must have made a mistake somewhere. Nice. Well, that's a good find. I'm going to go into something else that's sort of something of a logic puzzle. This is called Keep the Heroes Out, designed by Louis Bruet and published by Bruet Games. So that's Louis's surname, Brueh Games. And I'm calling this out particularly because I picked it up at Essen. It is being kickstarted before at some stage. And now it's just in print from the company, but it's actually back on crowdfunding on Kickstarter right now. Or possibly it's ended when this comes out. I hope not. I think it's still going. And this is a cooperative wave defense game. I guess is the best way to put it. It is the core game, which is what we've been playing at 2 players. It's cooperative and it is a set of scenarios. So you'll just work your way through the scenarios. They get progressively more difficult and iterate a little bit on that challenge. The box itself, core box anyway, comes with 9 different creatures that you can play as. So you might have, for example, so you're defending the dungeon, and on your turn, at the end of each player's turn, heroes will appear in the dungeon and try to steal your loot. And the dungeon is a bunch of different rooms that do different things, but at its core somewhere will be the Hoard. And in the Hoard is the level 4 treasure chest, which is what the heroes are trying to get open. Then radiating outwards from the Hoard and that's treasure hoard, not the orcs from World of Warcraft. And radiating outwards from that Hoard are treasure chests of lesser value. And what these act as is sort of speed bumps for the heroes, because they'll appear randomly in rooms and run straight towards the Hoard, but every time they get to a treasure chest, they have to stop and open it. But if they do open it, something bad happens for you. And it is a deck building game. So you start off with a crummy deck of 10 cards and a bunch of monsters, or possibly just one, depending on what you've picked. And then you will be able to move around the dungeon, collecting little resources like bones and frogs and spell books. And then if you take them to other rooms, you can purchase cards from a marketplace to build out and improve your deck. There isn't really any trash in the game, at least not that I've seen. We've only done the first 2 scenarios. But the cards, a lot of them allow you to draw more cards anyway. So it's very much in the sort of Paul Denon school of draw 5 cards, play most of them. There might be some situations where you might want to hang on to one, and that really depends on what you're good at, but you'll play most of them. Some of them will let you draw another one. You'll probably play that immediately too. And then, move on, like discard them all, draw back up. Jobs are good on. These cards are going to let you move your monsters around the board. They're going to let you attack the heroes, and they're going to let you activate the rooms, in order to produce the resources and then carry them around. And the heroes are controlled by the guild deck, which is just a set of activations. The guild deck will spawn a random hero type in a room, and the hero types, are dwarves that'll steal your loot, rangers that'll shoot you at a distance, rogues that will disarm your traps. The traps are very basic. They're just little tokens that you produce and then carry around and drop off in the dungeon. And if a hero runs into them, they'll die, unless they're a rogue. And they spawn in the room, and then they'll disarm them. Rude. There's a wizard who'll rescue everyone in jail. So there's sort of a push your luck mechanism where you can, on your turn, use the jail room to draw 3 cards from your deck, so you can have a bigger turn. But every time you do that, you have to reveal a card from the guild deck and put the heroes on it in prison. And so the more you do it, the more heroes mount up in prison. And then if you ever happen to spawn a wizard in prison, he lets everyone out, and suddenly they go careering off through the dungeon, and it's a big problem if you've been using this too much. We haven't really used the cell, the prison that much in the first 2 scenarios. We didn't really need it, but more on that in a minute. There's possibly more hero types I've forgotten, but those are the core ones that stick in my brain. So they'll spawn in a random room and then do their thing and start running towards the treasure. And there is quite a complex flowchart actually for how they advance and behave, but it's actually pretty simple to internalize because the behavior is actually quite thematic. Really, what they do is they spawn, and then they will activate their ability, and then they'll maybe kill some monsters in the room. If there are any, if there aren't, they'll try to loot the chest. And if they can't get the chest open on their own, they'll just wait till someone comes along and helps them open the chest, or you kill them. So really, it's sort of about controlling those tokens, trying to kill them before too many amount up in a room, because whenever a new hero appears, it refreshes all of the heroes in the room, and then they have another go at trying to get into the treasure chest and moving around. And the different monsters you can play as are all very thematic. There's a dragon that's very good at ranged attacks, but it's only got 1 figure, so it moves quite laboriously around the dungeon and, doesn't have a massive amount of coverage. Then you've got the skeletons. who have this ability where when they attack and kill someone, they spawn a skeleton, which makes sense. And so they're quite defensive and cool. There are the blobs. Whenever someone kills one, it becomes 2, or their defense card lets you spawn a blob, which is quite good. There are these witches that will be able to enable portals, which is quite situational because the scenario will limit where you can put portals, but they allow rooms to be adjacent if you turn them on, which is actually like not that exciting. But what the witches do, which is very cool, is whenever they defend against an attack, they can draw a card, which doesn't sound like much, but it's actually a really sort of neat thing that you can kind of set up to get through your deck quick and find the cards you've been building. So anyway, it's just a really sort of pleasing little puzzly deck builder wave defense thing. It's dead simple to execute. Each scenario will add some quirk to the guild deck. The first scenario was a witch who wanted a frog in the potions room, and whenever she appeared and there's no frog in the potions room, you all had to discard a card. It's dead simple. Arguably, it's actually better to just ditch the card than try to get a frog in the potions room, because that takes more actions. But, you know, that's sort of, I think, introducing you to the concept of the unique scenario cards. In the second one, it's a jailer who just throws more heroes in prison, turning off that mechanism. And later on, there's going to be a lot more. I think there's 20 levels in the core set and unique cards for each level to manage that. There is also just a general difficulty level. And again, the game is very good about talking about curating the experience, very good at telling you, like it said, don't play on level 2. If play on level 1, if this is your first game, once you understand the game better, you can go up to level 2, and there's a third level as well. I think there might even be like a sort of impossible 4th level, which has its own special token. But we decided to play on level 2. We're like, that's medium difficulty. We're experienced gamers. We'll just go straight into level 2. Died horribly. Lost horribly. It was awful. We're like, this isn't even a game. What's going on? Tried again on easy. Had a great time. So clearly there's some amount of skill there to adjust to. Hopefully it's all sort of reasonably well balanced. But now that we've played a couple of games and actually succeeded, I'm keen to go back and try it again on harder. You know, and see if I can sort of execute the skills that we've learned. I do think it probably works best at 2. It's certainly soloable. I think you could probably have a very good time playing it solo. I think it goes up to 4. I don't know if you get much out of 3 and 4 players. It'd be nice to have more variety of monsters because they've all got super cute little meeples running around the dungeon tiles, and it's adorable. But I think maybe the downtime, because the turns are not super involved. And generally speaking, you'll be very collaborative about what you're going to do. To that point, if you've got terrible alpha gamers in your group, you probably won't have a good time with this. But I don't know if like very competitive alpha gamery types would be interested in this game anyway. But that's besides the point. The point is, like, I think 3 or 4 players might add a bit too much downtime between turns just because the turns are relatively quick to execute. And so you might not feel like you're getting your bang for your buck, but I've tried it. Maybe your experiences will vary, but at 2, I've been really enjoying it.
Not heard of this game, but the meeples could be sold on it almost.
Oh, they're so
entirely
cute.
On that, yeah. Why are the mice look like they're so fed up with your nonsense?
I love the mice. They do look like that.
It's like, I can't believe we're here again. You know. No, let's give it a go. Certainly.
Yeah, I definitely give it a try if you get the chance. It's very cute. I picked up a few of the expansions at Essen as well, but I haven't had a chance to try them out yet. Still working my way through that core set.
Cool. Well, that brings me on to my most played game of the last couple of weeks, and a game that I played with all of my favourite players. It is Legacy of You, which is a solo game. So that's maybe why I played it so much. This is one of the Garfield games designed by Shem Phillips, and it is solo only. There is no multiplayer option in this one. And Legacy of You is, I think, a 2023 game, so been out for a little while, or last year at least, and it's a campaign game, or campaign-based game at least, that's fully resettable. So when you're done, you can easily reset it and go again. And I have played a couple of practice games, I played through the whole campaign. I won that 7-2, 7 wins, 2 losses. And played again at the end to try and see what the end game state game looked like, and then tried making up some variations to keep it interesting. So it's a rare occasion when I play a game 12 plus times, and even more rare when I do it across 3 days. So I only received this on the Saturday. I went out, I played SETI, came home, started playing Legacy of You, and then the next day played Legacy of You until people came round to play Rebirth and Through the Ages, and then spent the rest of the evening playing Legacy of You, and then the next day at breakfast played a game of Legacy of You, did some work, played another game at lunch, played some games after lunch, after work, in case work's watching. So the game itself is it's obviously not very long, right? 35-50 minutes a game, I would say. And in this game, you are you. Why you, right? So the character you. And you are... I'll be honest, the game comes with a campaign story, and there's a book with all the stories. After reading the opening one and the first story, I just looked at the functional elements that changed the game. I did not bother with the story. It wasn't interesting. But you are... you've inherited a stewardship of a town from your father who didn't do very well, or something like that. And you have to look after this town because there's a big flood coming. And in order to win the game, you must build canals or dig canals to divert the flood before it arrives and sweeps away everything that you've worked for. Right? And so this is represented in the game by 6 canal cards that you have to spend the resources to build before the tidal wave comes and sweeps it away. The way you do that is by you have your villager or townsfolk cards, and cards are multifunctional. You can exhaust a card, which is to put it into your discard pile, for the top resources on the card. You can discard a card, which is back to the townspeople deck, trashing effectively, for the resource that's in the top left and the trash effect, which is usually another resource. You can add a townsperson to your open slots on your village, which gives you generally, in fact almost always, a start of turn resource. So it improves your income by having them work in your village. Or you can discard a card for its food, which comes up a couple of times in the campaign, and on a couple of special abilities. So you've got these cards that do multiple things. The most common thing that they do is get you food or get you different coloured meeples. So there's 5 different coloured meeples in this game: white, yellow, blue, red, black. And they can all be used for most things. The white meeples are your labourers, and they're the most commonly used to improve the canal and to build huts, to build farms, to build outposts. Whereas the other meeples are generally needed to go and fight the barbarians. So, in addition to trying to build these canals, you're also fending off barbarians every turn. And there's a shared track of 7 cards along the top of the board that starts filling up with barbarians. So it's filled with townsfolk that you can buy, or barbarians start coming in and taking up those slots. Maybe not explaining it brilliantly, but basically you're going to be using your cards that you draw every turn to generate meeples and resources, which you're going to spend on clearing canals, defeating barbarians, building huts, going to worker placement slots, going hunting for when it's food shortages, or kind of going to places, placements like draw cards and do a little more. So the core part of the game is just this multifunctional card use and how to best make some resources into the resources that you want. The game starts with a couple of conversions, And as you dig more canals, you get better conversion rates and convert different types of resources. You may unlock some other parts during the game, but every game's the same. It's always the same stuff underneath the canal cards and underneath your hut cards. The things that change during the campaign are, if you do well, you add in harder cards. So that could be more barbarians, extra. I don't want to spoil too much. It's not that spoilable, but basically, worse things get added into the barbarian deck, worse things get added to the board, or there's additional things you have to achieve in order to have a victory. And if you don't do well, then you get cards that make it a little bit easier. Maybe it's additional income, maybe it's a special action, maybe it's some better townspeople into the townspeople deck for what you're making. And I played a couple of practice games of this and got smashed. I was like, this is really hard. And so then I went onto the Board Game Geek forums and everybody's like, oh, this is too easy. I was like, oh, okay, fine, I better get good. So I went back, played again, won a game just messing around. So then I started the campaign. I won the first game, lost the next game, won the next game, lost the next game, and then won the remaining 5. So the 2 bonuses I got from the 2 losses were enough to make the game smoothish sailing from there on in. It wasn't a total clean sweep, but it was enough that I was able to do it every turn. And actually at the end it was quite easy, and I kind of seen where people were coming from. So this was a game that reminded me a lot of Friday, the Friedman Freeze game, which deck building, Robinson Crusoe. The first couple of games you're going to lose, and then I found that I was able to, once I was consistently able to win the lowest difficulty of Friday, I went straight up the difficulty levels up to like level 4, defeating a number of pirates. So as you get good at a game, it becomes a lot easier. But the problem is that now I've done the campaign, the base game doesn't offer enough of a challenge for repeated plays. So what I would like to see are some tweaks. They said there's no expansions coming for this, but I could think of a few things that could be done to make it a little more difficult for the base game. But otherwise, I thought this was an excellent solo game, an excellent campaign, and particularly a resettable campaign. But for longevity, this is the kind of game that I would like to play solo, but I need to find a way to make it more challenging and more balanced on like a knife's edge for getting to the end. As it stands now, you do the first 3 canals, and if you get past that, then you're probably going to win. Clearing the last 2 or 3 aren't difficult. Or you lose on canal 2. Is kind of how it goes. So, but very good. Highly enjoyable solo game. You'll easily get 12-15 hours out of it. It's a smallish box. Components are great. The gameplay flow is great. It just needs a little more to it to be a long-standing solo game in my collection. But again, you've probably not played this, as it's a solo-only one.
Yeah, I actually didn't realize this was solo only. I have seen it around. Notable because it's sort of a release from Garfield Games that falls out of their normal triptych of Eurogame releases. But no, I didn't know much more about that. And actually, I think I'd confused, when you first started talking, I think I'd confused it with Hadrian's Wall.
I didn't get on with Hadrian's Wall. I've only played the Board Game Arena version, which is just like the base game. I believe Hadrian's Wall's campaign makes it better. And I've seen that from a few other people who definitely have a strong preference for one or the other. I fall into the legacy of camp. I did not get on with Hadrian's Wall particularly well. But what it has made me interested in is a lot more of the Garfield games. I want to give Paladins a go, particularly solo. I want to give Ezra and Nimalia. I want to give that a go. And there's the new one, which may or may not yet be out. I can't remember what it's called. That I'll be paying attention to more now that I've played this.
Well, I've played the first of the Viking ones, which I believe is Raiders of the North Sea, where you're moving over the ocean to raid the villagers on the other side. Then I played all of the 3 in the West Kingdom triptych, and I played the first of the next set, which I believe was Scholars of the Eastern Kingdoms.
I don't know. We're definitely down to south now, are we not? Architects of the Southern...
Oh, Architects of the Southern...
or Architects of the South Tigris.
The first in that set.
Yeah.
And certainly, of all of them, actually, the one that I've ended up keeping was Architects of the West Kingdom, which is the first in the West Kingdom series. I just really like the function it has of kidnapping your opponent's workers. It feels weird and enjoyable.
Is that I think I played that, or was it Viscounts? One of the two.
Viscounts is the third and probably heaviest of those 3.
Okay, I'm not sure which one I played, to be honest.
Viscounts is the one where you're running around the outside of the castle in the middle and moving your tokens up it.
No, I think it must be Architects then. You send them to jail.
Yeah, Architects is the one where every time you put a worker out, you get like more resources based on how many you've already got there. And then someone can kidnap all the workers there and put them in their jail. And you have to go release them.
Yeah, it's good.
I've played, so there's none of the Garfield games have I disliked. But most of them I play sort of once or twice. I enjoy pushing the buttons and pulling the levers. And then I'm like, okay, I'm done with it. With the exception of Architects, which I've called out, and actually Circadian's Chaos Order, which is not a Shem Phillips game. It is still Garfield Games, but it's designed by Sam McDonald and Zach Smith, which is very unlike everything else they've designed. Now, I haven't played Circadian's First Order, despite receiving a review copy of it, so that's my bad. But this was also a review copy. I was sent them both, and I'm very grateful to Sam for sending those to me. But Circadian's Chaos Order I've played 3 times, and it remains a sort of a really intriguing and strange design that I really like a lot. It's like a sort of a dudes on the map game where you're vying for these territories, and there are these sort of relics coming out round to round. And it's got this absolutely brain-destroying action selection system where everyone's like bidding on actions at the start of the round, and then you go through and execute them in order, and people get to do variations of them based on what they bid. And it's set in space, and you're all these different space races, like the robots and the humans and the scientific aliens, and everyone's trying to do their own thing. And everyone has their own. It's very asymmetric. Everyone's got their own victory conditions. So it's just it's very crunchy and heavy and strange, and I really, really like it. But it's definitely a curiosity, and certainly unlike anything else they've done.
I think it's First Order I've seen that I want to play.
Yeah, that's the first of the 2 Circadians games. And Chaos Order is the second one that came out. Anyway, I will drop a little teaser. I was going to talk about Battalion, War of the Ancients, the new Osprey game that's come out, but we're running out of time, so now I'm going to bump it to next week. So if you want to hear about Battalion, come back next week, find out. I'm also going to play Wondrous Creatures, so I'll talk about my take on that in the next episode. But for this episode, I've got one more big game to cover, and that's Revenant, which is live on Kickstarter right now. And of course, you'll know that we're giving away a full all-in pledge of Revenant on the charity stream on Friday the 6th of December, so you should definitely come and check out that charity stream. You could win an all-in pledge of Revenant. And in the meantime, I got a chance to play the prototype of this at GridCon. And it was a 4-player game. And what you're doing in Revenant is it's a science fiction. It's from Mindclash Games, designed by Alan Kirkby. Alan has one other design, as far as I can tell, from the BGG page. But this will be developed in-house at Mindclash as well. And it's set in the universe, the Voidfall universe. And thematically, what's going on is you're a fleet of starships escaping the void. And so every round, Void are going to spew out of these portals and attack the fleet, and you have to work with your fellow players to defend the fleet from the void. However, it's not a cooperative game. It's very Euro, but it's also very sort of hybrid. And within the fleet, there are different houses, presumably the houses of old Earth, all vying for control of the fleet. And you, as a faction within the fleet, will have alliances with these different houses. And this is, or the influence with the different houses. And there is a track for each house that tracks everyone's influence with that house. But there's also a hand of secret cards, which gives you additional influence with each house. And so fundamentally, the final scoring is coming from how the power of the house, I'm putting inverted commas for those listening to this without the video part, the power of the house, which is their number of ships remaining in the fleet, multiplied by your influence. So if you have 8 influence with the red house who have power 3, then you're going to get 24 points at the end of the game. So it's in your interests to sort of shore up your influence and save those ships. The point is, round to round, the fleet is being attacked by the void, and you've got to protect the fleet from the void. But they are completely overwhelming, and there's not really any efficient way to kill them fast enough. So you have to jump the fleet. And jump the fleet to a new location, which will wipe out a lot of the void and sort of reset the slate somewhat to give you a chance of survival or saving more of the ships in the fleet. You can also build more ships and add ships. If that sounds a little like the plot of Battlestar Galactica, then you're not... Sorry?
Coincidence.
You're not the first person to observe that. And yes, it very much has that feel. Of course, I'm talking about the TV show, not the board game. The board game very much focuses on who are the hidden Cylons within Battlestar Galactica. The TV show itself, also very focused on that, certainly and later on. But the initial premise, certainly in the pilot episode, is the Cylons are chasing the humans. The humans are on the run. They've been wiped out. These are the sort of last remaining humans trying not to go extinct, and they're jumping through space just trying to outrun the Cylons who keep catching them. And they have a big timer on the Galactica, which is counting down until the Cylons are going to catch them, and they have to jump again just to stay ahead. And this has that kind of vibe, except we don't have a giant timer, and we're largely kind of behind, because even after we jump, there's still some void there attacking. But it's a manageable amount of void. But immediately, there will be way too many, and you'll have to jump again. And this is still, now heavy caveat, this is still very much in its prototype stages. I was playing it there. David Turksey, who's a designer and developer that works with Mindclash, was there and was pointing out some of the stuff that's already changed in a later version of the game, and answering questions we had. And he didn't have all the answers to all of our questions either. So it's still, and as it should be, not completely finished yet, still being play tested, still being developed. And some of the points, and the reason I want to make a point of this as well, is some of the stuff that we raised after our game with David was already being addressed. So, while I might have some criticisms, I've also got a lot of compliments about the game as well. I thought it was a really interesting game, and I'm really interested into seeing where it goes. I think some people could really, really like it. I don't think it's for everyone, but I think the people who really like it will really, really like it. And personally, I'm very tempted to pick up a copy and back this myself. But I do want to see them address a few of the issues that we had. So I'll talk a bit more about that. But you start the game with all of the ships out. Well, not all the ships, but the vast majority of the ships out. And the big thing are these ARC ships, which are comprising a big part of the fleet. And the ARC ships are like worker placement spots. So it's fundamentally a worker placement game with 4 rounds of play. At the end of round 4, the Revenant, spoiler alert, reaches a planet which it might colonize. If you're doing very badly, it might not colonize the planet, and then you won't get the bonuses. And maybe based on the way the influence is shaken out and the cards that come out, you don't want to colonize the planet. That could be up to you. So you've got all these ARC ships that are the worker placement spots, and you can put your little guys out there to get the actions on those ships. And at the beginning of the game, you've got this sort of, not pristine, but largely present fleet with all of these action spots, and it's all going great. And then, you can jump the fleet at the end of the first round and probably save a lot of those ships. Or if you don't jump the fleet at the end of the first round, it could be devastating, and you could lose like a lot of ships, including a lot of arc ships, which massively reduces the amount of worker placement spots and fundamentally shifts what the game is going to look like moving forward based on what's been lost and what is left. And so there's this interesting dynamism between what is available for you to do and how you're going to leverage that to get points, because the vast majority of your scoring comes from these influence tracks. But like you've got your hidden influence, and then you've got your public influence, and you're sort of defining your influence. So like maybe everyone will get influence with the same house, and then you're quite happy to let all the other ships die. But maybe someone's looking and going, well, we're all in on the same house, so it's going to be the person that's getting the most points from the second placement that's going to win the game. And so you're sort of shifting that position just a little bit to try and give a leg up to a house that you've got a lot of secret influence with, and you're hoping to sort of get ahead on the points that way. I love this. I think this is great. I like hidden scoring. I like hidden motives. And in a game that is otherwise what I would describe as a heavy worker placement game, but relatively light by the standards of Mind Clash's big box heavy games. It really spices it up, and I think that's really great. There's also a lot of interesting bonuses to be got from fighting the Void and their ships. And you can do a lot of the cool sort of stuff you can do in worker placement games. You can develop your tableau. So you've got sort of equipment cards that you can deal out, which give you asymmetrical powers. You've also got training cards that you can assign to each of your workers to give them asymmetrical powers when you place them. One of your 3 workers is the captain. So they've got a power that you can place whenever you put them out. You can also level up your captain if you want. So you're sort of developing quite a lot of this asymmetry in your own tableau, which is very interesting and cool. And everyone's also actually got a hidden objective card that's different to the hidden influence. But that's like going to give you victory points at the end of the game for the different criteria on it. And certainly one of the cards we saw was awarding you for making sure that at least some houses had reached a certain level of power. Now, we had a player on our table who was really uninterested in saving as many ships as possible and subscribed to the strategy that if they didn't help, we would all have less efficient games because we'd be trying to spend actions to save the fleet while they were just off getting points. This didn't play out in the long run. They didn't win. So whether or not that was because... Now, what did happen was that another player who was very interested in saving the fleet did commit quite a lot of actions to sort of saving the fleet, and they also didn't win. They actually came dead last. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's because of this overstretching of the actions to save the fleet, or if that's just because, generally speaking, they're a less experienced player than the others at the table. I'm not sure. I won. And I won largely by a little bit of contribution to the fleet, but mostly focusing on sort of my objectives and where I was going to get points and making sure I was sort of in on the houses that other people seemed to be protecting. So I was probably not the most collaborative player in terms of saving the fleet, but I certainly didn't write the fleet off or actively try to destroy it either. I do think that getting the balance right in this sort of paradigm is really important. And I'm not quite sure the game rewards the player who jumps the fleet enough at the moment. But I do know that that's already being addressed. And there have been changes that they've been testing already, which were talked about. So after the game. So, I'm confident that this is sort of getting this balance right is something they're keenly aware of and they're working on. And, if anyone can do it, I'm sure they can. And if they do get that right, this is a game I'm very interested in. Because I do really like that sort of tension of what are you invested in? What are you trying to help? What are you happy to get lost? There's this sort of element of whoever destroys the most void will get to the top of the tactics track, which gives them a lot of power and control over assigning incoming damage. So they can they have quite a lot of say over what in the fleet is going to be destroyed, which is pretty cool. And if you let So there's a sort of there is functionally a role for a saboteur here as well. I don't think that's a problem, except if it becomes a dominant strategy, like just the saboteur wins every time. But I'm hopeful that that's not going to be the case. And I just think it's a really cool take. And I think if you like Archipelago, this is definitely something you should look at.
I do not like Archipelago.
Well,
I dislike Archipelago.
Well, that's fair enough. I do think they're aware as well of the perceived issues with Archipelago and are working to address those as well.
So long. It's the longest game in the world.
Archipelago?
Yeah.
This is not as long.
No.
This is much quicker. There's only 12 actions.
Okay. In fact, I've rated it a 4. I know we're just talking about ratings, but it'd be hard-pressed to convince me to get Archipelago off the shelf again.
I'm not going to start advocating for Archipelago because I think what that did... I think semi-cooperative is really, really difficult to do and really difficult to do well. And I don't think Archipelago did it very well. I thought Archipelago was very interesting at the time. I think it's aged very poorly, and I have no interest in playing it at the moment. However, I think if you're a group that still enjoys that, or sort of played it and found the novelties of Archipelago interesting, then I think Revenant might offer a more modernized, streamlined, balanced take on that. That's what I'm hoping for from it. I think, there's certainly enough design pedigree at Mindclash to deliver that, but it is a challenging space to balance right. And, that's, I think, the caveat.
Fair enough. It looks really interesting. It does make me want to go back and watch Battlestar Galactica, actually, or even play it.
Yeah, and I think if you like that theme of sort of, political intrigue in the face of overwhelming adversaries, then, thematically, given that this is quite a Euro game, and I'm hesitant to call it that, right? Because it's got so much sort of undercurrent of hidden information. Mm-hmm. You don't know what people's motives are. So while the surface level play of worker placement, optimizing the cards, managing resources is all very Euro, the underlying feel of the game is very not Euro. Or it's very much like that sort of semi-cooperative, whose team, or what are your real motives? Because no one's on your team, but they might just be invested in the same things as you, in which case you can trust them a bit more. They're still trying to get a leg up on you, though. So what I was trying to say was, for a game that's sort of surface level, very Euro, it does convey the theme very well.
The theme-wise, why would you not be... Who are you as a player? Why would you not all be trying to save as much of the fleet as possible? I understand gameplay-wise why you wouldn't, but...
Well, one could argue, so thematically, I suppose you're a contingent of the military force. You have your own frigate, which is like a sort of a combat ship in the fleet, which you can... Well, actually, you've got... The frigate's the most diverse ship because it can act as a drop pod landing on planets to extract resources. It can also act as a battleship to defeat void ships. It's the only one that can do both of those things. And whenever you play into your ship, you get to draw more hidden influence cards. You get to draft a bunch and pick one to keep. So you're sort of... Thematically, I suppose what you're doing is you're sort of almost like a mercenary military cell that's allying yourself with certain political factions within the fleet. And every time you go back to your ship, you get to develop some new political influence, or perhaps shore up some you've already got by, taking a card that matches the ones you've already got. So I guess thematically, that's what you are, sort of like a military contingent playing the different factions.
Playing both sides, so you always come out on top.
That's the idea, I suppose, yeah. But then the question is, I suppose, when we get to at the end. So at the end of the game, in the final round, instead of having this opportunity to jump to a new sector of space, you will have the opportunity to jump to a planet and colonize it. And there'll be 2 planet cards that come out that offer some they'll offer some new endgame scoring objectives and also some more influence for some of the houses. And so you'll be looking to see if any of those planets line up with what you're trying to do. And if none of them do, maybe you just don't jump the ship this round, Or you, I don't know if you could take that spot to jump the ship and then not jump the ship. I think you'd have to. So either you let someone else do it and focus on shoring up your points elsewhere, or you take it so you can jump it away from where you think the person in the lead wants to go.
When the Admiral's a Cylon, it's all over.
Yeah, well, precisely. Or in this case, a void being. But yeah, certainly an interesting design and something that felt different and intriguing. So keen to see how this develops. And of course, there is a super deluxe version available on the Kickstarter, as well as a lower plastic core game available.
Nice. Now, hopefully people will check that out.
Yep, and that I think that'll still be running when this comes out, so you can go and have a look at that. But otherwise, we'll call that a podcast. We'll say thank you very much for spending your time with us today.
What makes podcasts like these possible, Mike?
Support on Patreon. This is entirely thanks to the patrons. We're able to be independent and share our free thoughts with you because we are not sponsored. We do produce some sponsored videos on the channel. Those are very clearly called out and almost always gameplay or instructional. In fact, always gameplay or instructional.
Because otherwise, I'd rate them a 4.
If you find this content useful, if you like our thoughts, if you find them helpful, then please do consider supporting the Patreon. You can get in for as little as $1. Thanks very much, Barry, for joining me again for this episode. And of course, we'll be back in a couple of weeks to share more thoughts on what we've been playing.
Bye.